Chapter 716. After they left, Carter approached her and asked, "Are you really going? You don't have to force yourself if you don't want to." "But don't you want me to accompany you?" "Of course not." He shook his head in a way that did not seem like something an iceberg would do. "I want to be with you all the time." Even those bitter scenes of separation and heartfelt lines were not as good as this. She had thought that it was a unique dramatic exaggeration, but she did not expect to meet such a person. May glanced at him and asked, "Oh? Then who do you want to be with more, me or His Majesty?" Well, Carter was speechless for a moment. He had probably never considered the choice between duty and love. Amused, May patted his cheek and said, "Well, it seems that my status is comparable to that of the king." Chief Knight breathed a sigh of relief and pulled his wife into his arms. His hands began to move naughtily. "Stop. It's still daytime." She was about to dispel his desire, but suddenly a sour breath rushed to her throat. "Wretch." Carter immediately stopped and asked with concern, "What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell?" May shook her head, pushed the knight away, and took 2 deep breaths. Although there was nothing wrong with her body, she still felt a little nauseous, as if something was churning in her stomach. She went to the toilet and retched twice. Apart from some saliva, she couldn't spit out anything. "I'm going to call Miss Lily." Carter was a little anxious. He put on his coat and was about to go out. Wait. May stopped him. "I don't have a cold." "But you're already like this." His Majesty's teaching materials said that the early symptoms of a cold are vomiting and diarrhea. Miss Lily's ability can quickly cure this disease. The longer you delay, the more serious it will be. "Maybe I'm not sick." "Not sick?" Carter frowned. "Then why do you feel like vomiting?" This idiot without common sense. May blushed. She had heard from some people that if they had, that there was a high chance that they would have a similar reaction. However, she had no experience with this. If she made a mistake, wouldn't she laugh her head off? She was very happy to see her husband lose his composure, but she couldn't make a mistake in such a critical judgment. Otherwise, she would definitely be laughed at by him for the rest of her life. In the Witch Union. "I remember there's a green-haired woman who can see through things, right? You mean Miss Sylvie?" Carter nodded. "She can indeed see hidden things that ordinary people can't. But she can't treat illnesses. Can you ask her to come over?" May slowly returned to the bedside of the bedroom. Although it was just a guess, she subconsciously moved her hands and feet lightly, as if she was afraid of startling the thing in her stomach. "Maybe Miss Sylvie knows the reason." "You mean?" Carter finally reacted. He opened his mouth wide and his eyes lit up. He then clenched his fists and said, "I'll go find Miss Vendy right away. If she's in the inner city, there shouldn't be a problem." After the door was closed, May gently exhaled. It was such a wonderful feeling. In less than an hour, life seemed to have a new meaning. It was just a possibility, but it made her feel warm all over. Closing her eyes, she could not help but think of Jasmine's expression when she handed the salted fish to her. That was probably the taste of hope. That night, Sylvie confirmed her guess. She was pregnant. Congratulations. The next day, Roland heard the news and patted the excited Carter Lannis. "But there are still several months before the baby is born. Don't delay your work. Before the baby is born, I'll give you a long vacation so that you can spend time with her." "Yes, Your Majesty," Carter said loudly with his hand on his chest. "By the way, how exactly should the baby be born?" Roland suddenly thought of a very important thing. "Is there a midwife in Neverwinter?" "A midwife?" Chief Knight asked confusedly, "What's that?" "It's the person who delivers the baby. When the baby is born, someone has to, help deal with it." While answering, Roland searched Prince Roland's memory and found that the palace tutor did not teach him any relevant knowledge. "You can't ask a woman to cut the baby's umbilical cord, can you?" "Yes, this kind of thing is usually done by the elders. Most of them have similar experiences." "What if there is no such elder?" "Well..." Carter was stunned. "I'm not sure." The flourishing aristocratic families naturally had no shortage of manpower, But the commoners certainly did not have such conditions. It had only been a year since the establishment of Neverwinter. Most of the population was recruited or migrated, so the birth rate was still rare. However, once the life of the residents stabilized, the birth rate would definitely soar. It was foreseeable that from next year onwards, a large number of new lives would be born in this world every year. The problem was that Neverwinter did not have a reliable medical system so far. Roland couldn't be blamed for his negligence. This thing was also not available in other cities. When people got sick, the only thing they could do was to pray to the heavens, or take out a few silver royals to buy some strange herbs from pharmacists. Because of Nana and Lily, Neverwinter was almost free of diseases and injuries, so he had not started to establish a medical system. In his original opinion, even if technology advanced by leaps and bounds and jumped directly into the information age, the highly developed modern medicine could only be used to wash the feet of the two little girls. Therefore, this matter had been delayed again and again. But now, Roland found that no matter how backward it was, a medical system was absolutely necessary for a city of 100,000 people. For example, it was impossible for Nana and Lily to be responsible for childbirth. Not to mention that they would be too busy. Once the war with the demons broke out, they would probably have to rush to the front line, and the patients in the city would have to be dealt with by the citizens themselves. After Carter left, Roland opened his notebook and wrote down his idea of a primary medical institution. Anyway, it was a blank space, so it was better to start with childbirth. Building a hospital, training medical staff, popularizing health knowledge, and the most basic treatment methods. Fortunately, these things already had a certain foundation in the First Army. As long as he modified the propaganda booklet used in the army, it could be widely publicized as part of the popular teaching materials. The first batch of medical teachers could also be selected from the First Army. Even though he knew nothing about modern medicine, Roland clearly remembered that disinfection of utensils and prevention of wound infection would play a great role in the future delivery. As for the other things, they could be studied slowly in the future. In the afternoon, he received a piece of good news. Chapter 717. The sky was still gray, as if it was covered by a thick curtain. Countless tiny white spots drifted down with the wind, as if they wanted to fill the whole world. However, in front of the sea that embraced the sky, even the flying snow seemed small and powerless. The charming beauty gradually approached the shoal in the wind and snow. Roland had been waiting here for a long time. Facing the cold sea breeze, he opened his arms to Tilly, who had just boarded the dock. "Welcome back, sister." The latter took off her hood, revealing her soft gray hair. She smiled and gently hugged him. Everything seemed so natural. "It seems that the months of demons arrived earlier than me. I hope I'm not too late." As the two talked, the dock suddenly became lively. "Your Majesty, there will be a welcome banquet tonight, right? Can you arrange another hot pot?" Andrea came over and asked, her tone full of expectation. "Ahem, watch your words," Ashes reminded her. Roland didn't know if it was because they were getting more and more familiar with each other, or if it was because of Nightingale's influence, but her calm aristocratic aura seemed to be disappearing little by little. Of course, the basic score was determined by her appearance. Even when she took the initiative to ask what to eat for dinner, she still looked elegant and pretty. "Of course." Roland nodded and said, "In fact, winter is the best time to eat hot pot." "That's what I thought." Andrea's eyes lit up. "No wonder you're a royal aristocrat, and no wonder you're the man that Nightingale likes." Before she could finish her words, her mouth was covered by a pair of invisible hands. Ashes held her forehead, turned around as if she had not seen anything, and started to talk with Vendi. Tilly seemed a little surprised. She looked at Roland and then at Nightingale with a thoughtful expression. Roland felt a little embarrassed. Before Andrea could ask, he coughed and said, "It's windy here. Let's go back to the castle and talk." The witches who followed Tilly this time were still the three who played cards, as well as the former members of the Bloodfang Association, Iffy, Softfeathers, and Nightfall. It was not their first time to come to the Western region, so they did not even have to go through the process of assigning rooms. After putting down the luggage, Roland gathered everyone in the parlor and told them about the recent events in the Kingdom of Dawn. As partners sharing information, he believed that the witches of Sleeping Island should know about the tequila survivors as soon as possible. Hearing this, all the witches present could not help but smile. Ashes even asked directly, "So you are the chosen one that tequila is looking for?" Or rather, the first wizard in history, Tilly joked. "My brother is always so different. I don't have any magic power at all, so I don't have to be a witch." Roland spread his hands helplessly. Besides, the chosen one is just a name for the tequila witches. As for what the instrument of divine retribution is, I'll have to deal with them to find out. Before that, I plan to hold an artillery exercise outside the city wall of the western region, hoping to restore their lost confidence. At the same time, it's also a kind of deterrence, right? Although Ashes was no longer as unscrupulous as when they first met, she still did not hide some things. Just like the defensive battle against the demonic beasts that you showed us. "I just don't want there to be any misunderstanding between us," Roland said noncommittally. Besides, the exercise is not only for the tequila witches, but also for the people of Neverwinter to see the power they have. In this way, they will be full of courage even when facing the demons. The meaning of no misunderstanding was to let the other side clearly understand their own strength, so as to dispel some unnecessary ideas. This was also the basis of diplomacy in the new era. Since it's a drill, you can't choose to hold it when the demonic beasts attack, right? Andrea suddenly said, "I have a good suggestion." "What is it?" "How about using demonic beasts for target practice?" Andrea raised her eyebrows. "Compared with those monotonous wooden targets, real demonic beasts will be more impressive." Roland was a little surprised. This was a good idea. Considering that he wanted to organize a group of people to watch the drill, he naturally could not wait until the demonic beasts attacked before arranging for people to go up the city wall. Not to mention that he was afraid of trouble. He was afraid that by the time everyone arrived, the demonic beasts would have already been blown to pieces. So, in the beginning of the precision shooting session, he indeed planned to use some wooden targets, together with Soroya's painting skills, to create some fake targets. Obviously, Andrea's suggestion was more entertaining. For the residents of Neverwinter, nothing was more exciting than these evil enemies that had troubled the western region for years being annihilated under the artillery fire. The demonic beasts that will be used as targets. "Leave it to us." Andrea patted her chest. "Hey, isn't it better to stay in the room and play cards?" Shavi said with a bitter face. "I'm also willing to help. If he always took the responsibility as long as it was related to fighting. But will it be dangerous to catch demonic beasts?" Vendi asked worriedly. "If the scope is limited to the misty forest under Leaf's control, there shouldn't be any problems." Nightingale also seemed to be a little eager. She can monitor the movements of all the witches and demonic beasts in the area, and drive away the overly powerful demonic hybrids. Even if they encounter the fearful beasts of hell, there's still the sigil of God's will. "Why don't we hold a warm-up competition before the artillery drill?" Tilly laughed. "How about we divide the Sisters of Neverwinter into 3 groups and see who can catch more demonic beasts?" "Divide into 3 groups? Sleeping Island, the Witch Union, and the Tequila Witches." Andrea raised the corner of her mouth. "How about using a month's supply of chaos drinks as the reward? I'm really curious to know how delicious the food that you said is far more delicious than ice cream bread." "Wait, let Phyllis also participate," Roland said in surprise. "This will help deepen her intuitive understanding of the power of gunpowder weapons, won't it? Killing a demonic beast may not be a problem for Scourge's body, but when ordinary people can do it easily and efficiently, she'll naturally have more confidence in the power of Neverwinter. Of course, there's no need to force her if she doesn't want to participate." Andrea shrugged. "Since it's a competition, it's still up to her own will." "I see." Roland looked at Ashes and the others, who were looking forward to it, and roughly understood why they made this suggestion. Although Tilly's argument was somewhat reasonable, their original intention was more to satisfy themselves. After all, they were here to help fight against the months of demons, but under the power of the First Army, they could do very little. Most of the time, they could only stay in the castle and rely on playing landlord to pass their days. Compared to those assistant witches who were busy with their work, they were more like idlers. After all, they were combat witches. In this mass production, he might have indeed neglected the feelings of these witches. Chapter 7:18. After finalizing the plan to hunt demonic beasts, the witches went back to their rooms to rest and wait for the banquet to begin. Roland asked Iffy to stay alone. "There's something I want to tell you in case you're unprepared," he said as softly as possible. "I remember you once said that you had a friend named Annie before you were taken in by the Bloodfang Association, right?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Iffy blinked as if she did not understand why he suddenly mentioned this. Among the witches who went to Grey Castle from the Kingdom of Dawn, except for the tequila survivor who pretended to be a maid, the rest were all from the Kingdom of Wolfheart. Iffy's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, you mean?" Roland nodded. "One of them was called Annie, and she was also rejected by the Bloodfang Association." Iffy was stunned. After a while, she murmured, Is this true?" At this moment, Iffy's face was not only filled with joy, but also with guilt and worry. Perhaps she was still blaming herself for not choosing to leave with Annie. This was also the reason why he did not plan to surprise the two of them. He was not sure how Annie felt about Iffy. If she bore a grudge against the witch of the Bloodfang Association who had left her, it would be awkward when the reunion turned into a fight. 3009, Roland said. "What? 3009, her room number." He exhaled. "At least for now, she's very close to your description. And if you want to know the answer, you can go and have a look yourself." Iffy was silent for a moment, and then bowed deeply to him. "I understand, Your Majesty. Thank you. Go." Sometimes, time dilutes everything. Watching her hurriedly run out of the parlor, Roland touched his chin. "This is as far as I can help you," he thought. "Room number 9 on the 3rd floor, room number 9 on the 3rd floor." Iffy murmured the room number while running toward the witch building, ignoring Soft Feathers and Nightfall's questioning. Passing through the snow-covered back garden and the snow-covered olive grove, she went up the stairs and soon arrived at the 3rd floor. However, the closer she got to her destination, the slower her footsteps became. The uneasiness in his heart was also growing. When they traveled together, Annie took care of her all the way to Archduke Island. However, when she learned that Annie could not join the Bloodfang Association, she did not insist on staying. This sense of guilt had been tormenting her, especially after she thought that Annie had died in the Kingdom of Wolfheart. She had been unable to sleep for a long time. In the end, she vented her hatred on the nobles. She pretended to be strong and fearless, but it was just a shell to hide the regret in her heart. But now, this shell could no longer protect her. She instinctively felt fear. What would she do if Annie didn't forgive her? Iffy stood at the door but did not dare to knock. "I knew you'd be like this." A voice suddenly rang out beside her, startling her. Lowering his head, he discovered that the short underworld feathers had unknowingly appeared beside him. Twilight was also standing in the corridor, panting heavily. They seemed to be worried about her, so Iffy could not help feeling warm in her heart. Whenever it's related to Annie, you're always like a different person. "You all heard it?" "Of course. How could we not eavesdrop when His Majesty asked you to talk alone?" The little girl curled her lips. "If he wants to threaten you, we can also guard the door for him, can't we? How can you help me like this?" Iffy did not know whether to laugh or cry. The nervousness in her heart was also somewhat alleviated. "You're actually here to laugh at me. It's about time." Underworld Feathers shrugged. "Are you ready?" "Ready? For what?" Bang, bang. Before she could react, the little girl had already hammered the door several times and then ran towards Twilight. "Remember, just say what you want to say. No, wait." However, it was too late. Footsteps were heard behind the door. In an instant, Iffy felt her whole body stiffen. With a click, the door was pushed open, and a tall witch appeared in front of her. It was Annie who opened the door. Iffy would never forget her face. Her sharp eyes, slightly raised eyebrows, and the tenderness of caring for her companions were hidden under the determined face. Iffy had thought that she would never see Annie again and was afraid that she would forget her appearance sooner or later. However, when they met again, she found that her figure was only temporarily covered by the dust. When she came out again, she was as bright as a new one. Time seemed to stop at this moment. "Annie, I'm tired." "Annie, you go alone." "Why can't Annie stay?" "No, I want to be with Annie." Fragments of memories kept appearing in her mind, and her outer shell collapsed. It was as if she had returned to the past and became that helpless and hesitant girl again. She wanted to greet Annie, but she could not say a word. She opened her mouth, and her eyes inexplicably became wet. In the end, Iffy could not stop this sour feeling. She hugged Annie, sobbed softly, and then burst into tears. "I'm sorry," sob. "Annie. I'm sorry." Beasts never cried. From this moment on, she was no longer a beast. Annie was still a little stunned. When she opened the door, she did not remember who the witch standing outside the door was. She only felt that the witch looked very familiar. It was not until the witch hugged her and apologized in tears that the experience of traveling to the Bloodfang Association reappeared in her mind. It was impossible to say that there was no resentment in her heart. Even when the Bloodfang Association tried to sell her to the nobles, part of the anger of being betrayed was transferred to Iffy. However, seeing her crying uncontrollably, Annie suddenly felt that all the resentment disappeared. At that time, Iffy was as thin as a monkey, with a face full of mud, and always looked timid. It was probably impossible for her to resist the order of the Bloodfang Association and stay regardless of anything. Annie sighed, stretched out her hands, and gently hugged Iffy. "I don't blame you." Hearing this, Iffy trembled slightly and cried even louder. After an hour, she gradually calmed down. It was also during this process that Annie learned the whole story of the Bloodfang Association. When she learned that the mastermind, Earl Morgan, was dead and the other witches were no longer under the control of the Bloodfang Association, the twisted knot in her heart was finally released. And it was Roland Wimbledon and his sister, Princess Tilly, who had solved all these problems. Things seemed to be changing for the better. Looking at Iffy, who had fallen asleep in her arms after crying, and then at the curious faces of Amy and the others, Annie made up her mind. Chapter 719. It took longer than Roland had expected to bury the black gunpowder and the detonator, mainly because it was very troublesome to transport barrels of gunpowder to the predetermined location outside the city wall. The knee-high snow made it difficult for the carriages to move. Every time they encountered demonic beasts, the transportation had to be interrupted. Even with the help of Lotus, it took nearly a week to finish the arrangements. In order to ensure the best detonation effect, all the gunpowder in the buried area was detonated by electric detonators. The latter's principle was very simple. As there was no need to consider carrying and storing, it was basically composed of a small section of sealed copper pipe and 2 wires. The copper pipe was filled with collodion, and the wires were connected with thin copper wires to form a short circuit. When an electric current passed through, the copper wires would burn and fuse, and at the same time, the surrounding collodion would be detonated. All the lead wires were sunk into the ground through Lotus. The depth of nearly 5 meters ensured that the wires would not be affected by ground artillery or demonic beasts even without the protection of a casing. In the end, all the wires converged into the control panel on the city wall. To detonate the gunpowder in a certain area, they only needed to shake the corresponding hand-operated generator. Therefore, there was only one preparation left for the maneuver: live targets. Ahem, in this demonic beast hunting operation, friendship comes first, competition comes second, and safety comes first. Don't leave the monitoring area of Leaf. Do you understand? Standing on the city wall, Roland looked at the contestants lined up in front of him. For the sake of fairness and to reduce Leaf's burden, there were 3 groups of 6 witches participating in the competition. They were Ashes and Andrea from Sleeping Island, Lightning and Maggie from Neverwinter, and Phyllis and Agatha from Tequila. Originally, He wanted Iffy and Annie to form a team representing the kingdom of Wolfheart. However, Iffy was unwilling to participate in the hunt, and the other witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart had no combat ability, so he had to give up. Understood. The witches answered in unison, especially Andrea Quinn, who seemed to be full of energy. Since tasting the chaos drink, the noble witch from the head of the 3 families in the Kingdom of Dawn had been completely addicted to the unique taste of the fire dragon wine. She even hoped to exchange a month's chaos drink for the remaining half a jar of fire dragon wine. To this, Roland's answer was that if he could get first place, it was not impossible. The rules are very simple. The time limit is 1 day. Whoever can catch the most demonic beasts will be the winner. However, they must be locked in a cage for it to count. He pointed to the iron cage at the bottom of the city wall. Also, if anyone leaves Leaf's monitoring area, the team will be disqualified. In that case, the hunt begins now. Oh! As soon as he finished speaking, Lightning and Maggie took the lead and flew towards the concealing forest, leaving the other 2 teams to trudge on foot. Who do you think will win? After all 3 teams had left the city wall, Tilly asked with a smile. In her smile, Roland always felt that there was a trace of a different meaning. I guess it should be Lightning and Maggie. Their abilities are indeed not the strongest, but they have to put the demonic beasts in a cage to count the points. Therefore, those who are faster will undoubtedly have an advantage. Why don't we make a bet, brother? She raised the corner of her mouth and said, I guess the Sleeping Island group will be the winner. Andrea and Ashes? Roland pondered. Of these 2, one was a professional long-range combat witch, and the other was an extraordinary. There was no doubt about their strength. However, it was easy for them to annihilate the enemies, but it was much more difficult to capture them. If they wanted to smoothly transport the demonic beasts back, they had to beat every demonic beast half to death, which would take far more energy than directly killing the target. It would be difficult for them to get first place. It seemed to be a business that was sure to be profitable. Okay, what's the bet? If I win, well, in the future, I hope that half of the income from selling chaos drinks can be used to reward the witches who have made outstanding contributions to the development of the city. Evelyn herself was from Sleeping Island, and this would help attract more witches, so it was not a bad thing. In fact, even if she did not mention it, Roland had a similar plan. No problem. But what if you lose? I'll live in Neverwinter from now on. What do you think? Roland was slightly startled. He tilted his head to look at Tilly, but found that she did not seem to be joking. Really? Of course. Tilly's eyes showed a hint of slyness. But you may not necessarily win. If you don't believe me, just wait and see. I think so too, Nightingale whispered in his ear in the mist. I forgot to tell you just now. Andrea's magic power has condensed. 125 meters ahead on the left, a wild boar demonic beast is approaching you. The tree trunk swayed and shook off strings of snow. The rustling sound of branches and holly leaves formed Leaf's unique tone. In this way, Leaf could monitor the whole scene and talk to everyone at the same time. How far is 125 meters? Andrea was still not used to Roland's new measurement unit. She frowned and pondered. 1 meter is 2 steps, then 125 meters is, don't count. Ashes rolled her eyes and took off the Ashes messenger on her back. I can already hear its footsteps. A moment later, a black figure appeared in the dense forest. It was the demonic wild boar. It was about the size of an adult, and its grayish-brown tusks were almost as thick as an arm. Don't attack. We have to catch it alive. Andrea whistled at the demonic beast. Come to me. Hiss. The wild boar spat out clouds of white gas. It stared at the blonde witch with a pair of scarlet eyes and rushed straight at her. If an ordinary hunter were to encounter such a scene, he would definitely not have any thoughts of confronting it head-on. He would either quickly climb up the nearest tree or wait for an opportunity to escape. As for whether he could survive the fangs and trampling of the demonic beasts, that was another matter entirely. But Andrea did not move. She did not even take off her beloved rifle from her back. Instead, she stretched out her hands and spread her index fingers and thumbs to form a rhombus circle. Through the center of the circle, the wild boar was less than 10 steps away from her. She could almost see its dripping saliva and its shiny mane. Bang! She whispered. A strong airflow suddenly burst out from her palms. At the same time, there was a roar like an explosion. The wild boar seemed to hit an invisible wall and its whole body was thrown into the air. The snow under its feet was swept away by the airflow, stirring up dense white fog. The huge body of the demonic beast flipped over twice and fell heavily to the ground. It did not even have the time to scream. Its mouth was already foaming with blood, and its limbs were twitching. This was Andrea's new ability. By observing the difference between bows and guns, as well as Princess Tilly's force study, she understood the direction of her evolution. Since both of them gave energy to arrows or pellets, why couldn't she directly use magic to provide the energy needed for shooting? During the more than 2 weeks of sailing, she gradually mastered this new fighting skill. Chapter 720. First point, got it. Andrea elegantly stroked her long hair and shook off the snowflakes on her head. She pouted at Ashes and said, "I'll leave it to you to carry it." "Wait, why me?" The latter's eyes widened. "Because you're strong." Andrea spread out her hands and said, "This is a team competition, so we naturally have to work together. Listen, we represent Sleeping Island. If you lose the competition because of your slow carrying speed, I'll tell Her Highness Tilly everything." An overwhelming victory. Nightingale, did you see that? Andrea proudly looked at Ashes, who was unconvinced but could only bend over to carry the unconscious demonic beast. She felt extremely happy. After all, she could not carry these heavy things. "Stay here and don't move. I'll be back soon." The extraordinary put the strong wild boar on her shoulder and turned around to warn Andrea. "I know. Go ahead." After Ashes left, Andrea looked up at the forest and asked, "Leaf, please tell me where the next demonic beast is." "On your right, 450 meters away, a snow wolf." The branches swayed. "But are you not going to wait for her?" "Of course not. That would be too slow." Andrea thought for a while and said, "About 900 steps away. I'm leaving. Please tell her my new location." Leaf was silent for a moment and said, "I see. Don't worry. It's just a stupid wolf. With your reminder, it won't be able to touch me. Even if it was the giant hybrid she met last time, it could only die in front of her new ability. The original magic arrow was powerful, but the shooting range was only 10 steps. Now, as long as she had enough magic, she could shoot a projectile with the same power to a distance of 100 meters. Coupled with her derivative ability, even if the demonic beast had 2 more pairs of wings, it could not escape from her attack. She was sure to win this competition. "I'm sorry. I didn't expect him to involve you in such a trivial matter." Phyllis looked at Agatha, who was walking in front of her. "I just casually agreed." When she first heard this proposal, she did not think too much about it. Since she had lost her sense of taste, no matter how delicious the chaos drink was, it was not attractive at all. What made her agree was pure curiosity. Since she had nothing to do, she might as well take the opportunity to observe the Witch Union's combat ability. Unexpectedly, this hunting competition was actually a group competition, and her teammate was Agatha, the youngest senior witch in the past. It doesn't matter. Compared to staying in the lab all day studying magic stones, it's better to come out once in a while. Agatha shrugged. "If I didn't want to waste time, I wouldn't have agreed to His Majesty's request." "Is that so? Then, shall we just grab a few demonic beasts and bring them back to make up the numbers?" "How can we do that? This is a competition." "But didn't the Mortal King say that friendship comes first and competition comes second? That's what the others agreed to." "But they don't really think so. Just by looking at their expressions, you can tell what those guys are thinking. Even if there is no chaos drink as a prize, Lightning and Andrea are not willing to lose to anyone." Agatha paused. "If it was just an ordinary competition, it would be fine. But now we are the representative team of tequila, right?" "Yes." For some reason, Phyllis felt that Agatha was full of fighting spirit. "In that case, we have to win the competition." Agatha stopped and ice crystals condensed in her hands. Leaf's voice sounded almost at the same time. Behind you, 200 meters away, a wolf-eagle hybrid is approaching quickly. Phyllis took 2 steps back and looked at the white snow forest behind her. With a long howl, a slender white-furred monster appeared in the snow. When it spread its wings, it looked like it was gliding on the ground, and its running movements were minimized. It was no wonder that she did not notice the enemy approaching from behind. The temperature around Agatha dropped sharply, and the snow suddenly turned into a hard ice surface. As the enemy approached, she threw out the sharp ice crystals in her hands, forcing the hybrid to dodge, and then lost its balance on the smooth ice. The senior witch glided lightly to the monster's side as if she was walking on flat ground. She pressed her hands on its fur and instantly turned it into half an ice sculpture. Her fighting style is as smooth as flowing water. No wonder she is a genius of tequila, Phyllis thought in admiration. Although Agatha was a member of the Quest Society and had not experienced a real battlefield, it could still be seen that she had put a lot of hard work into combat training. In particular, she combined her footwork with her ability to form a field where she could take the initiative. If she fought with her on the ice crystals, she would inevitably be under her control. "How did you find it?" Phyllis asked curiously. "I summoned a thin piece of ice under my feet. As long as something steps into the snow nearby, I can detect it." "I see." She looked at the hybrid whose body was covered with ice crystals and only its head was exposed. "Shall I drag it to the city wall now?" "Just leave it here. It won't freeze to death for a while. We'll catch a few more and bring them with us." Agatha waved her hand. "We have to find the next demonic beast as soon as possible." She was serious. Phyllis realized that this young senior witch really wanted to win the game. Was it because she represented tequila? So in future negotiations, would she lean towards Neverwinter or the tequila survivors? This question made Phyllis feel uneasy. After a few steps, she could not help but say, "Lady Agatha, don't call me that, just call me by my name." Agatha turned around. "You said before that tequila witches are no longer divided by their abilities, but everyone gets along equally?" Ever since Lady Eleanor sacrificed herself, the number of surviving companions has dwindled. Everyone has gradually come to a consensus. Regardless of whether it's the Union's high-level ascendants or the most ordinary original witches, there shouldn't be any barriers of identity. Every witch is equally important, was proposed by Pasha. "There's no exception for me." She nodded. "Seeing the members of the Witch Union call each other sisters, sometimes I feel that they're the heirs of the new era." "I see." Phyllis hesitated. "Can I ask you a question? What do you think of the tequila witches and Neverwinter?" "What you want to ask is, which side am I loyal to?" Agatha stopped. Phyllis did not avoid her eyes, which was very important for them. "I'm loyal to my own beliefs," she replied. "Beliefs?" Chapter 721. The snow forest suddenly quieted down, with only the occasional sound of the wind brushing through the treetops above their heads. Phyllis was silent for a long time. "I thought you would stand on the side of tequila," she said reluctantly. "You were willing to represent the tequila witches in the competition, and you were willing to help." She quickly lowered her voice. "That's right, I shouldn't force too much. This is just a competition." Compared with the Tequila Quest Society that had once ostracized her, Neverwinter, which had saved her life, was obviously more trustworthy. And in Agatha's eyes, whether they were the inheritors of tequila or not. After all, after being transformed into the God's Punishment Army, they had lost the ability to use magic power. However, Roland's next words rekindled her hope. "I'm a tequila witch, and that won't change." Agatha's voice was calm and frank, as if she was making the simplest statement. "Then why do you think we should accept the leadership of the common people?" Phyllis was sincerely puzzled. Tequila, or Starfall City, Arietta, or dozens of cities on the Fertile Plains, all decided to accept the leadership of the Union. Is it just because the Union was established by witches? Agatha sighed softly. "Have you forgotten the original purpose of the Union?" "The original," Purpose, whether it was the Round Table Parliament at the beginning or the later three-chief system, the Union only wanted to achieve one thing: to defeat the demons, Phyllis said in a low voice. Yes, to defeat the demons has nothing to do with the common people. After the first battle of divine will, the witches removed the authority of the common people and unified the fertile plains, only because they were too weak and limited cooperation could not resist the demons' attack. Now that the common people have shown their power, what's the difference between serving the Union and serving Roland Wimbledon? Only he can unite the whole secular regime and accept the witches of this era. Agatha's words flashed through Phyllis's mind like a lightning. Phyllis found that she seemed to have misunderstood something, and her new idea greatly surprised her. You mean Neverwinter is the new Union? It's a part of the Union, Agatha corrected. Of course, His Majesty may not like this name. But no matter what it's called in the future, the essence is still the same. In order to win the divine will, Tequila, Starfall City, the Witch Cooperation Association, Sleeping Island, and the secular kingdoms will unite to decide the fate of the war with the demons. It's not a question of loyalty, but a question of survival. The reason I survived in the ice coffin was to defeat the demons. Phyllis answered that she was loyal to her own belief. Phyllis finally understood what Agatha was thinking. Agatha hoped to win the game on behalf of Tequila, which did not conflict with her serving Roland Wimbledon. Just like 400 years ago, all the city-states on the fertile plains had served the Union. The only difference was that the leader of the new alliance had been replaced by a mortal. You really think highly of him? She had mixed feelings. If it's just to defeat the demons, we're also working hard. Once we find the chosen one, the situation will be reversed. But we haven't found it yet, right? Or rather, I've found an unexpected chosen one. Agatha chuckled. Don't worry. If there really is such a witch, His Majesty will definitely not stop you from ending the battle of divine will. In fact, he will only do his best to help you find her. This is also the reason why I hope you can move to the western region of Grey Castle. More and more witches will be willing to settle down here, and the chances of you becoming the chosen one will increase, right? Phyllis was convinced. Although she did not want to admit it, what Phyllis said did make sense. The premise is that he can stop the demons. Do you really have confidence in mortals? If it's a mortal who closely associates witches with all ordinary people, I think I can look forward to it. Agatha raised the corner of her mouth. Didn't His Majesty prepare an artillery exercise for you? After the tour, maybe you'll understand why I'm so confident. The so-called artillery exercise should be displaying the key to the art that she had mentioned before. Although it was not clear what the two had to do with fighting against the demons, even a genius senior which had said so it was better to look forward to it a little. Just then, a series of loud roars pierced through the forest, shaking the branches. Ow, ow. Phyllis's expression suddenly changed. She was very familiar with the sound. It was clearly the roar of a flying devil beast. Why are there demons here? It's Maggie. Agatha curled her lips. Her ability after evolution is to turn into anything that can fly, including demons. So it's caused by her ability. Phyllis was slightly relieved, but soon she frowned again. In this case, it's too easy for her to catch demonic beasts, isn't it? A single low-level demonic beast had no consciousness and could easily be subdued by a more powerful creature. If it was a flying devil beast, it would probably be too scared to move on the spot. She could catch one at a time. Not to mention that it was much faster to transport prey by air than by dragging it through the snow. How could they win in this case? Don't worry. Agatha seemed to see through her thoughts. It's not that we don't have a chance. Maggie's ability is really convenient, but whether it's her, Lightning, or all the witches here, none of them have undergone rigorous combat training. In other words, they can't reasonably use every bit of magic power. As she spoke, a black shadow swept over her head, grabbed a wild boar demonic beast, and flew towards the direction of the city wall. It could be seen that her figure was astonishingly large. Even an adult devil beast among the demons was probably a size smaller than her. You mean Maggie can't hold on until sunset? The breath of a devil beast is too strong and will drive away the prey in its active area in advance. In this way, it's very likely that she will first turn into a pigeon and search for targets with lightning, and then suddenly turn into a devil beast to catch demonic beasts. Transformation is a process that consumes a lot of magic power. When the magic power is exhausted, it will be difficult for lightning to maintain a high efficiency of capturing demonic beasts. Agatha smiled. So you'll be the next demonic beast. I'm only responsible for restraining its movements. Phyllis's eyes lit up. For them, learning how to squeeze every bit of their potential was a necessary lesson in combat. In this regard, the group of newly promoted senior witches were indeed no different from the fledgling novices. Yes, leave it to me. Chapter 722. As Agatha had expected, Maggie's cheerful roars were rarely heard in the afternoon. Witches were always in a state of high tension during a battle, which consumed both their magic power and physical strength. Therefore, in the combat training of the Union, how to seize the time to relax and restore physical strength were the most important contents. After all, in the face of swarming demons, the only way to survive on the battlefield was by relying on reasonable rotation and teamwork. Therefore, when Phyllis drove and lured the demonic beasts away, Agatha would sit on the side and take the opportunity to rest until several demonic beasts gathered together. At noon, she would also eat snow and dry rations to cope with it, almost without stopping for a moment. After sealing 3 or 4 demonic beasts in ice, Agatha would solidify the snow into a smooth piece of ice and quickly send the prey to the city wall of the western region by gliding. As the gray sky gradually darkened, Leaf informed them that the competition was over. When they returned to the starting point, they were surprised to find that there were more than 100 demonic beasts locked in wooden cages, including 30 hybrids. The largest wolf-bear hybrid was almost as tall as the city wall and had limbs as thick as stone pillars. Even the God's Punishment Army and devil beasts would find it difficult to carry it. Which team caught it? Phyllis did not show any change on the surface, but she was a little disappointed. After all, the two of them had achieved the best result. She had thought that the result of catching 22 small and medium-sized demonic beasts was outstanding enough, but now it seemed that they were probably the team with the lowest score. The question was, how did the other two teams catch so many demonic beasts? Thank you. Vendi walked to the front of the team and was relieved to see that everyone was safe and sound. She took out a notebook from her bosom and began to announce the results. The team from Neverwinter, 7 points. Well done. Wait, 7 points? Phyllis could not help but be surprised. The team from Neverwinter is not the first place? Did the two from Sleeping Island manage to capture the remaining 80 demonic beasts? It's all Maggie's fault. Lightning put her hand on her forehead and said, if she hadn't robbed a winter eagle's nest halfway and spent 2 hours roasting its eggs, we would have been able to catch a few more. You were the one who asked me to go coo. The pigeon on top of the little girl's head pouted. And you ate the most after the roasting. You even went to pick a handful of bird beak mushrooms, saying that the taste of bird eggs with mushrooms was even better, coo. Anyways, it's good that you're back safely. Next up is the Sleeping Island team, 15 points. As expected of Ashes, Vendi continued. She's just an errand girl, Andrea sighed. I was the one who knocked down all the demonic beasts. It's a pity that we didn't encounter enough monsters, and she couldn't run fast enough. Ashes glared at him. Why don't you try carrying the wild boar and running 15 rounds in the snow? Only muscular barbarians are suitable for this kind of thing. That's still better than someone who can't even stand up to the wind. You. Ahem. Vendi quickly interrupted their argument. Last up is the Tequila team, a total of 22 points. Congratulations, a month's worth of chaos drinks is yours. I'm so jealous. Andrea said unwillingly. I want to drink it too, coo. Maggie looked at Agatha eagerly. Phyllis was very surprised. But there were obviously hundreds of demonic beasts in the cages. They were all caught by Leaf. Vendi smiled and waved her hand. Hearing the words of the head of the alliance, All the contestants unanimously looked at the green-haired witch. Leaf touched the back of her head in embarrassment. Because I was worried that too many demonic beasts would enter the hunting area, I set up a 1-kilometer zone around the periphery and only allowed them to pass through a few fixed paths. Later, I thought that since the demonic beasts that fell into the vine trap couldn't escape, I simply dragged them to the edge of the forest to add more targets for His Majesty. There was a sudden silence. The number of demonic beasts caught by one person was more than the total harvest of the competition team, and she did it while monitoring the competition. How could there be such a terrible combat which among the higher ascendants of the Alliance? Even a transcendent could not catch so many demonic beasts in a day. What's with this inexplicable sense of frustration and shock? Phyllis suddenly felt that the first place in the competition was not so important. The next day, Neverwinter finally completed all the preparations for the artillery maneuver. When Roland arrived at the western section of the city wall, both sides of the wall were already crowded with people who came to watch the maneuver. The 2,000 tickets were all sold out. According to Edith's statistics, 80% of the ticket buyers were former residents of Border Town. Obviously, for the local people, spending 2 silver royals to participate in an activity attended by His Majesty was no longer an unbearable burden. The sky of the western region seemed to be cooperating with the maneuver. The heavy snow that had fallen all night stopped in the early morning, and the whistling north wind also became a little milder. The vast field to the west of the city wall seemed to be covered with a layer of silver carpet. The ruts and footprints left by the transportation of demonic beasts were all covered by the snow, appearing flat and clean. The demonic beasts, which were used as targets, undoubtedly became the focus of the audience. More than 100 war trophies were divided into 3 rows according to the distance of 300 meters, 500 meters, and 1,000 meters. The more ferocious and burly the demonic hybrids were, the closer they were to the city wall. Obviously, watching these powerful monsters turn into bloody pieces under the bombardment of the artillery brought unparalleled pleasure to the people of Neverwinter who had been tortured by the months of demons. As for the slightly smaller ones, they were all used as embellishments for the buried gunpowder. Anyway, the distance was relatively far, so there was no need to see so clearly. Instead, the quantity was more important. In the last row, the cages that imprisoned the demonic beasts were arranged in a rectangle with a length and width of nearly 100 meters, waiting for the brightest light. Your Majesty, the artillery battalion of the First Army is ready. Iron Axe climbed up the city wall and reported loudly. Roland exhaled a mouthful of white air and turned to look at Echo beside him. Play the platoon march. Yes, Your Majesty. As magic power spread out from Echo's fingers, the loud and familiar music instantly rang through the whole section of the city wall. Although he had heard this marching song many times during the school sports meeting, now that it echoed in the sky above Neverwinter again, Roland could not help but feel his heart palpitate involuntarily. As if the song contained a surging power, he could not help but hold his head high and chest out, welcoming the arrival of the soldiers. All the subjects who were whispering to each other quieted down and turned their eyes to the end of the long street closest to the city wall. They saw a group of soldiers in the same color uniform appear at the corner of the street in neat steps and orderly walk toward the predetermined position. Roland remembered that 2 years ago, when he first encountered the months of demons, this city was only the size of a palm. After less than 2 months of training, the people held spears and short guns and fought against the demonic beasts on the cement wall made of rubble. Even an ordinary demonic hybrid could make the militia flustered. But now, they could face a higher level of challenge calmly, while the seemingly powerful demonic beasts became the target of Neverwinter's declaration of strength. This contrast made Roland very excited. When the soldiers climbed up the city wall from the gentle slope, the crowd burst into enthusiastic applause, and the applause came wave after wave, as if it would never stop. He knew that any speech was no longer necessary at this moment, and the audience only waited for the pleasant roar of the cannons. Chapter 723. Philin Schilt was a little surprised when the soldiers of the First Army lined up neatly on the city wall. As a former Star Knight of the Western region, he was familiar with knight training, so he naturally knew how difficult it was to keep a group of people in order. Whether it was a knight or a mercenary, when they were inspected by the Lord, there would be no more than 5 people in a row. This was because the line was too long, so it was easy to stagger. In the eyes of the crowd in the distance, it looked like a mess and was really an eyesore. The more people there were, the more difficult it was to control. However, this group of soldiers had more than 100 people, and there were more than 10 people in each row. Coupled with the uniform color clothes and the bright ribbons in front of their chests, they looked like a moving phalanx. This visual impact made Philin feel an unstoppable momentum. Once they could maintain the formation, the advantage of having a large number of people would be vividly reflected. This could also be seen from the enthusiastic response of the crowd around him. Look at the 3rd row, that's my child. They're walking so orderly. It's almost like they're one person. If it were a battle between 2 armies, I'm afraid the enemy would be scared out of their wits at the sight of this formation. I think they should run away at the sight of His Majesty's name. What's the name of this song? I don't know, but I feel full of strength. That's the magic effect of Miss Echo. It's a pity that May can't see this scene with her own eyes, Irene said, holding the Light of Dawn's arm. If it were her, she would definitely be able to reproduce this exciting scene in a play. She's pregnant, so of course she can't stand on the city wall with you in the cold wind. Philin shook his head with a smile. Don't worry, there will definitely be more opportunities in the future. I bet there will only be more and more such activities in the future. Whether it was the knight's inspection or the artillery drill, they were all means for the Lord to show His strength. The strength that Neverwinter had accumulated so far had already exceeded everyone's imagination. His Majesty still had a lot of territories to conquer. With such a team, it would not be surprising if he could bring all 4 kingdoms under his rule. In order to convince people, such a display was naturally necessary. Do you want to join the team, my dear? She asked abruptly. What? The Light of Dawn was stunned. I can feel it. Irene smiled at him. Your heart is beating so fast now. Is that so? Philin exhaled a breath of white air. So that's how it is. Even if my father didn't say that, I probably wouldn't be a teacher for the rest of my life. Sir Schilt was right. If he really loved books so much, he wouldn't have decided to become a knight and become a household name, the Light of Dawn. The army was the most suitable place for him. He wanted to follow the First Army and become His Majesty's sword. He wanted to fight everywhere and expand the kingdom's territory to an unprecedented level. Although His Majesty had said that a knight who surrendered would never have the chance to pick up a weapon again, according to his father, there were other ways to join the First Army. I wonder what the advisor department of His Majesty is like now. He stared at the artilleryman entering the firing position as if he was looking at himself in the future. The music stopped. It was an instruction to prepare to shoot. Van ordered the artillerymen to aim at the target. The 6 Longsong cannons placed on the widened area of the city wall lowered their barrels and aimed at the cage 300 meters away. At this distance, the cannonballs would almost not fall but would fly in a straight line toward the target. Since the demonic beasts' bodies might not touch the fuse, the accuracy of the muzzles was lower so that the cannonballs could hit the snow under the cage. Holy sh*t, this guy is so ugly. Narsen whistled. The cannons he was in charge of were aiming at a large wolf bear species. The latter seemed to have sensed that something was amiss and struggled to break free from its shackles. Its massive body slammed into the cage, causing it to sway nonstop. Be serious. Vander frowned and said, This isn't the usual training. Everyone is watching us. I feel a little nervous. Cat's Claw's voice was slightly stiff. Being stared at by so many people makes me want to pee. Many people felt the same way. Yeah, it's even more uncomfortable than when we faced the charge of the Duke's Knight Regiment. If we miss it, we'll be laughed at by the whole city. Just do as we did in the previous training. Cut the crap. Venna glared at Cat's Claw. Remember not to confuse a live bullet with a headless one. If something goes wrong, you'll be put in detention. Now load. After entering the loading process, the scene suddenly became busy. No matter how they felt, the long-term training had made them all familiar with their movements, and they could complete the operation even with their eyes closed. Compared with the 12-pound field artillery, the 152mm longsong cannons were loaded much faster. When all 6 cannons were ready, Iron Axe's countdown came from the top of the city wall. 10, 9. The noise of the audience stopped abruptly, as if they were waiting for the moment when the muzzle burst out with fire and thunder. However, it was unexpectedly calm. Looking at the crazily roaring demonic beast in the cage, he thought of his brother who died of hunger and cold in his arms 4 years ago. He thought of the days when he trained day and night just to eat one more egg. He also thought of the days when he held a spear and fought with demonic beasts on the rubble city wall. The changes in the past few years were still vivid in his mind. 5, 4, 3. He was originally just an ordinary miner in the old neighborhood of Border Town. It was not until His Majesty said, "I have faith in you. Do a good job." Van made up his mind to stay in the militia and fight to protect His Majesty's territory from the demonic beasts. But even so, he did not expect that he would come to this point today. Van secretly turned his head and looked at the man in gray in the distance. Roland Wimbledon was the reason why he was so calm. As long as His Majesty stood behind him, no matter what kind of enemy he faced, he would not take a step back. 2. Fire! Fire! Van waved his arm fiercely. The 6 longsong cannons spewed out long flames and smoke at the same time. The huge roar turned the snow on the wall into flying white mist. The distance of 300 meters was almost covered in the blink of an eye. When people heard the deafening sound of the cannonballs had already fallen in front of the hybrid demonic beast. The compressed fuse touched the double-base gunpowder in the warhead. In a flash, 6 mud columns rose from the snow and tore the wooden cage into pieces. The seemingly strong body of the demonic beast was like a piece of paper in front of the raging airwaves. Wood debris mixed with steaming flesh and blood rushed into the sky. Intestines and broken limbs were scattered everywhere. Chapter 724. According to Roland's plan, once the bombardment started, it would not stop. First, 5 rounds of volleys would turn the first row of 20 demonic beasts into powder. Then it would be free shooting time. Using the rapid firing of blanks and the detonation of black gunpowder, it would create an imposing manner as if thousands of cannons were roaring. Therefore, when the continuous shooting sounded, the atmosphere on the scene ushered in a new high. The explosions set off smoke and dirt in an endless stream, and the area within 500 meters of the city wall looked like the end of the world. Occasionally, some cages were smashed by flying stones, and the demonic beasts in the cages that could still move reacted not to rush to the city wall, but to turn around and flee. Fear overcame their bloodthirsty instincts. However, very few of them could escape from this land of death. Under the strong shock waves gushing out of the ground, their internal organs had long been ruptured and displaced, and their eardrums and eyeballs had lost the function of perception. Most of the demonic beasts fell to the ground before they could go far, and then they were engulfed by the newly detonated explosives. "This is nothing. You haven't seen the war with the church." Andrea covered her ears and proudly said to the stunned witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart, although there were only 2 cannons at that time, there were hundreds of flintlocks and smaller iron cannons. Their opponents were not demonic beasts in cages, but the swift and powerful God's punishment army. When the battle was at its most intense, the whole open space was filled with flying projectiles, and as long as you exposed your head, you would die. Compared to this, that was a real war. Is that so? Amy looked shocked. No wonder they lost. Hero sighed. This is not something that humans can resist. Seeing such a scene, aren't you afraid at all? Broken Sword looked at Andrea with admiration. Taking advantage of the gap between the explosions, Andrea elegantly combed her fluttering long hair and said, "Of course, you'll get used to it after seeing more. I witnessed the whole process of the war, and I even killed 2 God's punishment army soldiers with my own hands." She completely forgot that when she climbed the city wall for the first time, She was also full of surprise and disbelief like them. Now, she somewhat regarded Neverwinter as her second home. Even when talking about these weapons, she could not help but speak with a sense of pride. Compared with most witches who just watched the fun, Phyllis was much more observant. When the first row of demonic beasts was blown to pieces, she did not pay much attention to it. At this distance, the spears of mad demons could also threaten the soldiers on the city wall. Facing the bone spears falling like a storm, even if these to be called long-song cannons were amazingly powerful, how long could the common people who manipulated them last? But when the cannons turned to the second row of cages, her expression finally changed. Could it be that the mortal king's intention in arranging the demonic beasts was to let the explosions spread further away? The last row of cages was almost 1,000 feet away. If the long-song cannons could hit that area, it would mean that their range was almost equal to that of the siege beasts, but their lethality would be far greater. If the witches could have such long-range weapons, they would have been, and would have long-song, to the long-song, and, if it to attack, to the long-song, it to the long-song, it would and it. If the witches had such long-range weapons, they might be able to defend the holy city of Tequila. Was this the trump card of Neverwinter, and the reason why Agatha was so confident in Roland? When she asked the Ice Witch this question, the latter just smiled and shook her head. It was placed 1 kilometer away to satisfy the audience, because any further would affect the enjoyment of the maneuver. As for the range of the new cannons, His Majesty said it could be more than 10 kilometers, which is 10 times the current range. Agatha tilted her head and said in her ear, "In other words, it can hit the place where the manipulator can't see." 10 times? Phyllis was stunned. Although she did not quite understand the units of meters and kilometers, 10 times the current range was nearly 3,000 feet, and some demons' outposts happened to be set within this distance. Did it mean that if the cannons were placed on the top of the city of Tequila, they could directly hit the demon's lair? How could it be possible? How could they ensure that the weapons could hit the enemies that were out of sight? Seeing that Phyllis was a little stunned, Agatha continued, "But it's not easy to hit the enemies that far. It requires a lot of calculation and improvement of the aiming device of the cannons. I heard that those astrologers are studying this. His Majesty seems to want to write a shooting list that can calculate the landing point of the cannonball according to the data before firing. Even if the enemies are several kilometers away, they can accurately hit the targets." "Are you sure?" Phyllis clenched her teeth. "Doesn't that mean that as long as we build a few more cannons like this, the demons can't even get close to the city wall?" "Yes, His Majesty called this method of attack cleaning the ground." Agatha shrugged. "It probably means cleaning the dirty things on the ground. Although it's a little hard to pronounce, it's quite appropriate." "Well, do you know how to make cannons?" Phyllis hesitated and whispered into Roland's ear. Roland took a deep look at her and waited for a new round of explosions to pass before he said, "I know what you want to say. Some of the materials for the cannonball were indeed provided by me, but it's far more than 1 or 2 people can make them." "Even witches can't do it?" "Far from enough. Do you know how many common people are working in the chemical plant in Neverwinter? Nearly 2,000. And the number is still increasing." Agatha sighed. "But what they've done is just turn acid, grease and gas into explosives. The production of cannons is a completely different system. There are more than 3,000 people in the mine and smelting factory, and more than 1,500 people in the processing factory. After the cannons are made, there must be corresponding maintenance and use personnel. Even in the age of Tequila, how many common people did the Union have?" Phyllis fell silent. When Arietta and Starfall City fell one after another, the human territory retreated to a corner of the plain, and the surviving population also plummeted. When Tequila was the only one left, the number of common people controlled by the Union was only about 30 to 40,000. However, they were responsible for supporting the combat witches, logistics, and maintaining the operation of the city, so they could not spare so many people to make long-song cannons. If Agatha did not lie to her, even the Tequila at that time could not do this, let alone the witches who were hiding in the underground labyrinth. At this moment, the sound of cannons suddenly stopped. The first 2 rows of demonic beasts had completely merged with the snow and turned into a pool of blurred flesh and blood. It was terribly quiet around the city wall. No one spoke at the scene. They all stared at the farthest row of cages, as if they were waiting for something. Phyllis looked at Agatha in confusion, and the latter smiled at her. "The key is here." Chapter 725. There was no sun in the months of demons, which had never changed for thousands of years. The sky was always a gloomy gray curtain, and when people looked up, they could always see snowflakes drifting with the wind. The only difference was the size. In today's weather, 1 or 2 snowflakes would occasionally fall, and it would be regarded as the end of the snow, but most of the time, the white spots would occupy the entire sky and fall densely on the white ground. Therefore, this white light was particularly dazzling, and the glow that broke through the ground instantly illuminated the surrounding snow, as if the gray world was a little brighter. Phyllis could not help holding her breath. Her sight seemed to be fixed at this moment, and everything seemed fast and slow. The light soon dimmed and turned into an orange-red fireball. With this change, the ground hundreds of feet away was arched up. This was definitely not an illusion. She clearly saw that the flat snowfield bulged up, forming a gentle arc, as if the snow was not pressing down on mud and rocks, but flowing water that could change its shape at will. At the top of the arc was the red fireball, which was still rising, as if it wanted to break free from the shackles of the earth. Then it did. The next scene almost happened in the blink of an eye. Smoke and flames erupted from the ground, tearing the curved ground into pieces. The fireball soared into the sky, and the billowing black smoke rushed up dozens of feet, unfolding in front of her vision into a high wall that blocked the sky and the sun. Both the cage and the demonic beast turned into flying ashes in front of it. Until then, the earth-shaking roar reached her ears, and at the same time, it brought a heart-palpitating tremor. In an instant, the earth shook and the mountains shook. Phyllis subconsciously grabbed Agatha, opened her mouth, and wanted to say something, but was blocked by the oncoming airflow. The spectators on the city wall were also blown off their feet. It took a while for them to recover from the incredible explosion. There were no cheers or applause. Everyone was dumbfounded by this scene. The only thing they could do was to look up at the wall of smoke that continued to rise. "Is this the key?" She swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Mortals had actually grasped such terrifying power? Even a greater devil wouldn't be able to survive such violent earthfire. The red sun was getting darker and darker. Only a few scarlet flames could be seen in the black smoke. However, the rolling smoke had already leaped into the air, as if it was connected to the clouds. The soil and pieces of demonic beast meat that had been sent into the sky by the explosion fell down, creating a bloody rain of mud in the surrounding snow. Looking at this scene, Phyllis finally understood where Agatha's confidence came from. With this kind of earth-shattering power, even in the face of cruel demons, mortals would have a chance to contend. However, she still could not understand why Roland Wimbledon called it art. Could it be that explosions were art? Retnine was completely intoxicated by the cold wind filled with the smell of gunpowder. The roar had completely awakened his desire. So this is chemistry. So this is chemistry. He looked at his companions, Rayleigh and Archer, the former chief alchemists of the King's City, and found that their eyes were shining with the same light. This kind of radiance was incompatible with their aging appearance. He vaguely remembered that he had only revealed this kind of radiance when he entered the alchemy workshop at the age of 10 and was officially accepted as a disciple. Retnine felt that he had finally found the direction that he had been pursuing all his life. That was to attract everyone's attention like the sun. Only chemistry could achieve this. Unfortunately, he was now nearly 50 years old. If he had seen this scene 20 years earlier, he would have understood the power of chemistry earlier. It was not the fire and smoke produced by the burning of coarse snow powder, but the pure light and heat. Fortunately, he finally knew it now. Looking at the astrologers who were still dumbfounded, Retnine could not help but smile. From now on, there would only be one name in the school of sages, while the other would be completely forgotten. He wanted everyone to feel the power of the explosion and praise the greatness of chemistry. Thinking of the many chemical explosive plans in intermediate chemistry, he could not help but want to immediately throw himself into the experiment. What are you waiting for? Let's apply for a laboratory from Kyle Sichi. That's what I thought. The three of them opened their mouths and made a suggestion at the same time. Retnine looked back at the column of smoke that lingered for a long time and then walked toward the laboratory. Now do you understand why I want you to stay in Neverwinter? Edith stroked Cole's head. The latter was silent for a long time and then said in a dry voice, "Because of this?" It was obvious that he was frightened by the powerful explosion. His face was still a little pale, and he tightly grasped his sister's arm with one hand. "Because no one can resist Roland Wimbledon," Edith said slowly. "The feudal nobles are insignificant in the face of such power. As long as he wants the kingdom to become, the kingdom will become that way. He said that he doesn't need the nobles. From that moment on, the nobles should give up their positions. Unfortunately, most people still don't realize this." Although she said it was a pity, there was not a trace of regret on the Pearl of the Northern Region's face. She even seemed to be gloating. Cole Kant pursed his lips and said, "We are also nobles. But we're no longer feudal nobles." Edith led him to the battlement. At this moment, people were gradually leaving the city wall, and the surrounding area was much more spacious. Cole could clearly see the charred ground in the distance, which looked like it had been plowed. The reason why nobles are respected is because of their wealth and power, not the land under their feet. So the nobles won't really disappear. Just like this plain, no matter whether it's broken or neat, covered with snow or green grass, the essence won't change. Neverwinter is the starting point of a new era. If you want to be a nobleman in the new era, you must integrate into the new rules set by His Majesty. Cole felt that he seemed to understand, but at the same time, it seemed that he did not. Nevertheless, under the influence of his sister over the years, he still nodded and said, "I'll stay here and not go back to the northern region anymore." "That's right. And don't you think it's far more interesting to explore new rules and new power than to run an unchanging land?" Cole raised his head and looked at his sister's pretty side profile. Under the blowing of the north wind, her long hair fluttered in the wind like the softest silk. Her long and narrow eyelashes curled upwards, matched with the beautiful curve of her nose and lips. There was a kind of indescribable beauty. The only thing that puzzled him was the blush on Edith's face, which was unique to women when they were excited. Could it be that Big Sister would be interested in a pillar of smoke? Chapter 726. After the maneuver, Phyllis, accompanied by Agatha, went to the Lord's castle again. Walking into the office, Roland Wimbledon's expression was the same as last time. He did not show any complacency, as if it was just a trivial matter. However, this time, she felt that the common person sitting behind the mahogany desk was much more important, and she unconsciously addressed him with an honorific. "Your Majesty, before contacting the Tequila Witches, I'd like to ask you a few questions." "Go ahead." Roland nodded. "Can the defensive weapon you demonstrated be mass-produced? If the plan to find the chosen one did not go well, the war with the demons would undoubtedly last for many years. If this weapon really needed nearly 10,000 common people to produce and the production rate could not increase, Neverwinter would still be faced with a bitter battle. By then, she could also fight for more status for the tequila survivors. After all, the gods' punishment army controlled by the witches was definitely a force to be reckoned with. When the Longsong cannons could not kill the siege beasts coming from all directions, they would have to rely on the witches to fight their way out. The king smiled. "First of all, I have to point out that the Longsong cannons are not purely defensive weapons. Although it looks very heavy and difficult to be carried by manpower or livestock, it's not a problem for some vehicles. In fact, with a little improvement, it can be completely turned into a weapon that can be used both for offense and defense." "Carry vehicles?" Phyllis repeated. Before she came to the castle, she had heard from Agatha that when she talked to His Majesty, she often used some awkward words, most of which were very straightforward. If she did not understand, She could directly ask, and His Majesty would usually be happy to answer. As expected, Roland rubbed his hands and said, as long as it can carry it, for example, the simplest, three-masted sailboat can be regarded as a vehicle. But this kind of big boat can only sail in the swirling sea. I'm just giving an example. Neverwinter, which will have vehicles that can travel freely on land in the future, has already started to develop such a thing, although carrying the Longsong cannons is probably just a sideline. A war machine that can travel freely on the road and carry such a heavy load? However, from what the king had said, it did not seem like it was specially prepared for cannons. Just when she wanted to ask a few more questions, Roland had already continued. As for the problem of production, when the new generation of processing tools is popularized, I believe it will cover the entire border wall within a year or two. This answer made Phyllis inwardly gasp. Covering the city wall in a year or two. Even if it were catapults and ballistae, it was impossible to build so many of them in such a short period of time, right? If that was the case, the surviving witches of Tequila would not be of much use. This was a mixed answer. Perhaps their status would be lower than the other witch organizations, but it was always better to have fewer casualties. However, based on her previous experience, she decided not to raise any doubts and changed the topic. I understand, Your Majesty. The second question is, I noticed in the artillery drill that the last explosion did not seem to be caused by the Longsong cannons. Is it the most lethal means that you have mastered so far? When she asked this question, Phyllis noticed a strange smile on Roland's face. According to the technology that I have mastered, it can only be regarded as the lowest grade. The lowest grade? She said in surprise. Can you make an explosion more violent than it? Explosions are endless. Roland shook his head. The second grade is the level of weapons that Neverwinter actually has at present, and the third grade is above it. At that level, it is not impossible to raise a city to the ground in one go. Phyllis was completely stunned. She instinctively wanted to think that this statement was nonsense. Raise a city in one go? That was not a power that could be possessed by mortals or witches. Only God could do that. However, when she saw the strange gleam in Roland's eyes, she found that she could not easily deny this statement. In the end, she could only lower her voice and ask, "What kind of weapon is it?" Roland did not answer directly. Instead, he took a sip of tea and slowly said, "What do you think the scene of the last round of explosion looked like? Does this have anything to do with my doubts?" She closed her eyes and thought for a moment before saying, "A new sun." If the smoke and dust were seen as clouds, the rising orange fireball was undoubtedly the morning sun at dawn. That's right. It's just a red morning light. The third grade weapon is the real sun. Roland raised the corner of his mouth as if he was talking about a God-made item. You can't look at it directly because it will burn your eyes. If you get too close to it, just the radiance will set you on fire. The temperature of its core can turn stones into gas, and the airwaves produced are strong enough to collapse a house. This description made Phyllis shudder. She could no longer tell whether the man was exaggerating or telling the truth. Then how can we make it? We have to complete 2 epic-level tasks. One is called resplendent radiation, and the other is called the distance of the sun, and Your Majesty. Agatha interrupted him with a frown. Please don't talk in your sleep at this time. Nightingale's voice also came into Phyllis's ears. Epic-level task? Resplendent radiation? She found that she did not understand a word. She looked at Agatha, who spread out her hands helplessly. Ahem, anyway, it's very complicated, so I need more witches to advance the research and accelerate the technological development of Neverwinter. Roland coughed twice. Of course, the things you found in the ruins may be helpful, so I hope to have a deeper discussion as soon as possible. Phyllis looked at the king with mixed feelings and then took off the ring in her hand. As promised, I'll contact Pasha and other survivors for you. When I crush this 5-colored stone, they will be able to sense my location. However, I'm afraid it will take 1 or 2 days for them to talk to me directly, because I don't know when Pasha will be able to prepare the magic core. Can we talk anywhere? Yes, but if conditions permit, it's better to talk in a spacious place. Well, Then crush the magic stone in the reception hall, so it'll be more formal, Roland said to Agatha. Take her there. Yes, Your Majesty. After leaving the office, Phyllis took a deep breath. Chapter 727. The effect of the artillery exercise was much better than Roland had expected. In the last round of explosions, 70% of the total reserve of black gunpowder was detonated underground in one go, causing a sound no less than that of roadside bombs in modern times. When subcontracting the burying, he suddenly had an idea to mix some aluminum powder into the gunpowder. As a result, the fireball was even more dazzling, and the moment it rushed out of the ground, it even had a bit of a sunrise. This explosion basically announced the change of the First Army's weapons from black gunpowder to chemical gunpowder. As for the distance between the third level of the sun, he could only imagine it in his mind. Although the content of uranium in the Earth's crust was not low, even higher than that of silver and gold, and it was not difficult for Lucia to collect uranium by decomposing the granite bit by bit, the fatal radioactivity was always a tricky problem, and even lead plates could not be foolproof. Most importantly, he was not sure whether Nana could cure radiation sickness, which was the biological matrix aberration caused by particle ionization. Therefore, until it was a matter of life and death, Roland temporarily did not intend to start the resplendent radiation, which was no less than the epic task of stealing the divine fire. After all, that thing was too dangerous. After finalizing the meeting with the tequila witches, he invited Tilly into his office. It was time to talk about the bet. After pouring her a cup of chaos drink, Roland cleared his throat and said, about the previous hunting competition. Although Agatha is indeed a member of the Witch Union, the Neverwinter team didn't win. Tilly seemed to have already guessed Roland's thoughts, and her eyes curved into a crescent moon. Brother, this bet can only be considered a draw. If you want to count Miss Leaf in the Neverwinter team, I won't admit it. Of course, this bet is indeed a draw, but I still want you to stay, Roland said frankly. Such a straightforward statement made Tilly slightly stunned. So it's a win-win situation. How about it? This was the first time Roland had seen Princess Tilly so speechless. He had to admit that she looked quite lovable. I'll set up a fund with 30% of the Chaos Drinks revenue to reward people who have made contributions to Neverwinter, regardless of whether they're witches or ordinary people. You can settle down in Neverwinter, either in the witch building or with the migrants from Sleeping Island. After talking about business, Tilly quickly recovered from her daze. She pretended to be nonchalant and coughed twice. Only 30%? I think we agreed on 50% at the start. Because according to my calculations, even 30% would be a shocking number. Giving it out as a bonus would be enough to last a lifetime. Roland explained, the rest of the money will be used for the construction of Neverwinter, including the witches' residences and necessary facilities as well as salaries. In general, they will be spent where they are most needed. If you need it, you can withdraw it directly. Even if I use up all the golden dragon I earned? Of course, storing it in the warehouse is just a waste of space, he said indifferently. In the future, when the precious metal currency could not keep up with the demand for productivity growth, the credit currency would appear. At that time, money would become a simple number for the government, which could be printed directly. It was meaningless for him to store money. Tilly pursed her lips and said, "It sounds like a good deal." "That's why it's called a win-win situation," Roland said slowly. "What do you think?" She sighed and said, "Since you've put it this way, I can only agree." Although it seemed like a helpless answer, the undisguised smile at the corner of her eyes showed her feelings. Roland could not help but smile. A year ago, she was skeptical, but now she was relaxed and smiling. Tilly probably finally believed that he could bring a comfortable and stable life to the witches. By the way, after chatting for a while, he changed the topic to the recovery plan of the southernmost region. "I plan to bring the Sand Nation's territory under the rule of Grey Castle this winter. Their customs and inheritance of power are completely different from the Four Kingdoms. If I want to completely conquer it, I need your help." Then Roland told her about the Sand Nation's laws and the Holy Duel ceremony. Letting ashes participate in the duel? That's not a problem. Tilly pondered for a moment. But why do you want to annex the desert? Since the establishment of Grey Castle, no ancestor has ever been interested in that barren territory. It just looks desolate. The underground fire that has been burning for decades and the salt crystals that stain the ground are all evidence of buried treasures. Roland spread out his hands and said, "If I'm not wrong, the southernmost region will be the key to the development of Neverwinter in the future. Since that's the case, I'll explain it to Ashes." Tilly didn't ask any further and nodded her head. Now that the trust between them had been established little by little, it was foreseeable that the Witch Union and the Witches of Sleeping Island would be closely linked in the future. Thinking of this, Roland felt very gratified. After sending his sister out of the office, he immediately called Echo over. The holy duel could only win him the right to speak, but it could not solve the problem once and for all. He did not need a clan to live in Iron Sand City, but a large number of obedient Sand Nation people. For this reason, he had to become the legendary Great Chief. Roland did not have time to go to war with the army, so it was necessary to choose a spokesperson. As the princess of the Osha clan, Echo was undoubtedly the key to winning over the Sand Nation people of Majing. "I don't know if Iron Axe has talked to you about returning to the southernmost region." He went straight to the point. "This winter, the First Army will be stationed in Iron Sand City. I hope you can go there on my behalf." "No. He didn't mention it to me." Echo looked a little surprised. Then she bit her lip and said with a sad expression, "Your Majesty, you don't want me anymore?" The first part of her answer satisfied Roland. It seemed that Iron Axe also understood that the marching was a secret of the kingdom and did not easily disclose it to his clansmen. However, the second part almost made him choke on his saliva. Although he knew that Echo did not mean that, it still sounded full of ambiguity. At the same time, he felt a cold breath coming from behind. Nightingale's hand had tightly grasped his shoulder. "Of course not. This is only temporary. When I become the great chief of the Sand Nation people, you can return to Neverwinter with Iron Axe. Besides, if you don't want to, I won't force you." After listening to his statement, Echo relaxed and said, "I understand. But if you want to make all the Sand Nation people surrender, I'm afraid it's impossible to do that with a holy duel." "Of course, I have other ways." Roland smiled and slowly revealed his plan. "This." Echo was suddenly stunned, with a complicated look in her eyes. "Is this really okay?" "Of course, I'm the king of Grey Castle. If I say it's okay, then it's okay," he said word by word. "By the three gods, the Sand Nation people will never forget your kindness." She no longer hesitated. She knelt on one knee and solemnly bowed to him. "Echo is willing to complete this mission for you." "Very good." Roland stood up and helped the Majin woman who had gone through a lot. "Then I'll leave it to you." Chapter 728. In the depths of the labyrinthine cave, the tremors above her head were getting louder and louder. Pasha knew that they were approaching in large numbers and in a menacing manner. She put her limbs into the soil and spread upward. Then she saw what was happening outside the mountain. Dark demonic beasts were running among the mountains. Several entrances to the maze ruins were blocked by the strong, fearful beasts of hell. The demonic hybrids following them were tearing the bodies and organs of the fearful beasts crazily until they opened a new passage. If they did not do this, they would be squeezed to death by other demonic beasts at the entrance of the cave. But it would not be long before the passage was blocked again. The way to unblock it was to repeat the previous process. As a result, before the demonic beasts entered the core area of the ruins, the scene at the entrance was already like a purgatory of flesh and blood. The underground was also not peaceful. The wilderness beasts were passing through. Their mouths full of sharp teeth were the most effective digging tools. Their greasy and moist skin made it easy for them to wriggle underground. Their long bodies carried a large number of symbiotic hybrids. Once these monsters broke through the defense line, they would often cause heavy casualties to the defenders. Even mutated flying beasts appeared in the sky. However, they could not enter the ruins and could only hover and howl in the air. This was an indescribable experience. She clearly did not personally witness all of this, but regardless of whether it was the hissing above the mountains, the trembling of the ground, or the sound of the earth rubbing against each other, they were all accurately transmitted into her brain through the thousands of tentacles, forming countless vivid and lifelike images. This was the largest demonic beast attack since the beginning of winter. Pasha withdrew her limbs and sank deeper into the ground. From time to time, some fine soil fell from the top of the cave and hit the braziers on both sides of the passage. She could see every stone in the ground without the fire, but her companions who had been transformed into God's punishment army needed it. However, at this moment, everyone had moved to the hall of the maze, so she put out the fire in the brazier. "What's the situation up there?" As soon as they entered the hall, Alethia's voice rang in their minds. "The wilderness beasts nearest to us have almost broken through to the 3rd level." Pasha's answer was projected into everyone's consciousness. "What's the situation down there?" "Nothing unusual," Alethea replied. "But I saw a few charred bodies." Since Pasha had gotten a new body, her understanding of combat had changed greatly. The flat world suddenly became three-dimensional. Since the enemy could move freely underground, the survivors must always pay attention to the situation under their feet. As long as they were not standing at the end of the abyss, they should not ignore the hidden threats. Fortunately, there was a flowing river of magma below the ruins, which sealed most of the bottom of the labyrinth, saving them a lot of trouble. At present, there were no demonic beasts that were not afraid of fire. How long until the instrument of divine retribution is ready? Pasha looked at Celine. "I don't know. Half an hour? Maybe 2 hours?" Eleanor's anxious voice came from the magic core. "I've tried my best, but the damage in Area 43 has just been repaired. Lady Eleanor needs time to calculate." "Don't worry, they won't be able to come so quickly," she comforted him. "The large demonic hybrids will be stuck outside the cave. Leave the smaller demonic beasts to us." "You're right, just treat it as a daily practice," Elena said. "With us here, the demonic beasts won't be able to break into the hall. Actually, I don't think we should retrieve the relics so quickly. Isn't it better to let Starfall City waste some time first?" Someone said. "Then they have to guard Hermes. Without the gods' punishment army, those mortals are useless." Alethea retorted. "The city wall can effectively block the demonic beasts, and the kerosene and catapults can still deal a heavy blow to those beasts. We just have to hide in the pivotal secret temple and wait for them to break into the city to retrieve the relics. There are hidden traps under the cathedral. What if they trigger the collapse trap? It's a small matter if we are buried alive, but if the relics fall into the hands of the demons, we're finished. No matter what, we can't afford to take this risk." "Stop arguing," Pasha interrupted. "Since we've retrieved the relics, there's no other way. Have you forgotten what Lady Natalia said? Arguments should only be made before making a choice. No matter what decision we make, we shouldn't regret it." After she spoke, no one else's consciousness rang out again. Obviously, they agreed with her statement. In the tequila era, such a situation would not occur. Inferior witches had to obey their superiors unconditionally, and those who disobeyed would be severely punished. The most serious dispute in the Union was between Natalia and Alice. Before breaking off with Starfall City, Natalia had said the above words to all her followers, and then attacked the Queen of Starfall City. Since then, the tequila survivors were no longer divided into superiors and subordinates, and disputes gradually increased. But Pasha didn't mind it at all. She preferred a vibrant organization to a cold system. Just as they changed the topic and discussed how to block the demonic beasts, Pasha suddenly felt a strange message coming from one of her tentacles. Violent tremors echoed in the rock stratum, as if something heavy had fallen. The speed was so fast that it seemed there was no obstacle. It broke through several layers of the labyrinth, and after a few seconds, it was already approaching the depths of the temple. How is this possible? The ground was filled with dense soil and rocks. Even a wasteland beast would need to spend several minutes to dig a single layer down. This was not the surface, so how could it move so quickly? Pasha hurriedly moved more tentacles in the direction of the movement. The more tentacles she monitored in an area, the more images she received. Then her heart suddenly sank. No one knew when, but a 6 to 7 mile long crack had appeared in this area, splitting the earth into two. At first glance, it looked like a cliff that stretched out from the ground. A wild beast had drilled through the mountain wall and rolled all the way down, landing right above the temple. Prepare to fight the enemy. Pasha raised the voice of her consciousness to the maximum. The direction of the magic core. Just when everyone was slightly stunned, the stone slab at the top of the hall suddenly cracked, and a long wild beast slid down from the crack. Its body was covered with scratches and bruises, but under the reflection of the magic core, its body emitted a dark blue light. Obviously, the fall had caused great damage to it, but even so, it still used its last breath to complete its mission. Chapter 729. No! Pasha shouted. Selene pulled out her tentacles from the instrument of divine retribution and knocked down 2 demonic hybrids. Then she was bitten by the other demonic beasts. A few wounds immediately appeared on its sarcoma-like body, and scales and gray body fluids splattered everywhere. A few agile wolf-like mutants even climbed up her rough skin and tried to bite the main tentacles at the top of her head. The other witches drew their swords to help. Elena was the first to arrive. Like a silver light, she cut the demonic hybrids in half and then rushed into the demonic beasts to kill them. Wherever she went, blue blood splattered. The monsters that mortals feared were no better than ordinary beasts when faced with Scourge, who was not inferior to an extraordinary. In the early stage, they were at a disadvantage in both strength and speed. As more and more witches joined the battle, the demonic beasts were killed one by one, and the chaos finally subsided. Pasha retracted all her tentacles and quickly ran to the center of the hall, her heart in her throat. Unlike the gods' punishment witches who could change their bodies at will, they could not change into a new body after entering the tumor-like body. Once their bodies were on the verge of death, they could only choose to merge with Lady Eleanor. If it were Pasha herself, she would not mind such an ending. Ever since she decided to follow Lady Natalia, she was ready to sacrifice herself at any time. But Selene could not. Among the survivors, she was the only one who had the deepest understanding of the magic core. Once they merged, they would not be able to activate the instrument of divine retribution for a long time. "Are you okay?" Pasha asked nervously as she landed beside the scarred tumor-like body. "Well, it's not a big problem." Selene's reply made her feel relieved. "As long as the holes in my body are blocked, I'll be fine. But a few of my tentacles were bitten off. It hurt so much. You should be grateful that you can still experience pain." "I can't wait to relive the feeling of pain," someone shouted. That's right. If Phyllis heard this, she would be envious. Unfortunately, she can only get it from the spirit. "Don't say that. She only serves the mortals for the sake of tequila," Elena said with a frown. "She should be called number 76 now, right? I wonder how the Chosen One project is going. How long has it been? It's no longer the era when the Union ruled the whole territory. It's not easy to contact the witches who are hiding. We have to hold on for at least 2 to 3 years. Or we can hold on until the arrival of the bloody moon and then be devoured by the army of demons," someone added. "Damn it, do I have to say it out loud?" His words caused everyone to roar with laughter. "Calm down. We're not out of trouble yet," Aletheia said angrily. "What should we do now? There's a hole on the top of our heads. If one falls, the second one will fall. Should we split into a group and guard the bottom of the hole?" Pasha thought for a moment and then rejected this suggestion. "No, it's okay if the demonic beasts that have landed are fighting with the witches who stayed behind, but what if they turn around and attack the periphery? That way, the people guarding the entrances would be in danger of being attacked from both sides. Even with Scourge's power, it would still be dangerous." "I agree with Pasha." Elena nodded. "Moreover, we will be easily separated and surrounded by the demonic beasts. We won't even have a way out. Instead of fighting separately, it's better to gather in one place and guard the relic and the core in the center of the hall. As long as Celine repairs the instrument of divine retribution, we can all survive. I agree. Me too. No matter what, it's better than being bitten to death by demonic beasts from behind. Then let's do this. Pasha waved her tentacles. Give up the bottom hole and focus on defending the magic core. This was equivalent to facing a swarm of demonic hybrid beasts in the center of the empty hall. Undoubtedly, what they had to face next would be a hard battle. The only fortunate thing was that the fearful beasts of hell, which were too large and strong, and the unpredictable flying species could not go deep into the maze. Otherwise, the situation would be 100 times worse. However, she was a little worried. The number of demonic beasts was too astonishing, and the gods' punishment witches did not have unlimited physical strength. If the instrument of divine retribution could not be repaired for a long time, could they really block so many monsters? If she had known this earlier, she would not have let Celine continue to test the core during the months of demons, at least not this most important core. An hour later, the demonic beasts finally appeared at the bottom of the maze, and the battle began. All the witches did their best. There was no doubt that the outcome of this battle would determine the survival of the human race. Pasha also joined the battle. She drew magma from the lava river and sprayed it on the heads of the black hybrid beasts. The hot and sticky red water ignited the monsters' furs, and the fire was so fierce that the air was filled with a burning smell. Even so, they still rushed forward and insisted on charging toward the location of the relic. The gods' punishment witches formed a wall of flesh and blood with their bodies. As long as their heads were not injured, they would not really die. Therefore, this battle was extremely fierce. Even though their bodies were bitten to pieces, it did not prevent them from lying on the ground and cutting off the enemy's legs and abdomens. At this critical moment, Celine's excited voice came into everyone's mind. The core calculation has been completed. The magic mode has been adjusted to mutant annihilation, and the instrument of divine retribution is ready. Pasha, leave it to me. Go and activate it. Aletheia spat out a mouthful of magma, forced the nearby demonic beasts to retreat, and jumped in front of Pasha. Among all the survivors, her ki was second only to Lady Eleanor's, and it was also the thickest one among those who could activate the instrument. Pasha nailed the main tentacle to the stone slab above her head, and with a leap, she came close to the instrument of divine retribution. Based on her previous experience, she stretched out all her tentacles and tightly hugged the spindle-shaped core suspended in midair. In an instant, the magic power in her body swarmed out, and the dark cold light emitted from the skeleton of the instrument became brighter and brighter. She could feel her magic power condensing into a strange translucent polyhedron in the center of the spindle-shaped body. It was extremely complex, with countless edges and layers, almost indescribable in words. This is the mutant annihilation core, Pasha realized, just like the magic symbol of the senior witches, but with much more power. When the blue cold light turned into a dazzling pure white, the skeleton of the spindle-shaped body suddenly opened, and the center of the hall suddenly became as bright as day. Now! Celine shouted. Chapter 730. When the light wave passed through her body, Pasha felt a strange pulling force. The remaining magic power in her body was restless, as if it wanted to follow the light wave. The illusion of being forcibly separated only lasted for a few seconds. Soon, everything returned to normal. Along with the magic power, the whole hall also quieted down. Through the short tentacles on her back, she could see that in the area where the light wave swept through, the hybrid demonic beasts were frozen and then fell to the ground without a sound. This was the most efficient way of killing. Whether it was mud, rocks, or brick walls, nothing could stop the advance of divine wrath. Even without monitoring the ground, she could imagine the scene on the upper level of the labyrinth. The densely packed demonic hybrids would die like insects, and the magic that kept them alive would dissipate. Without the support of magic, their mutated bodies would instantly lose the ability to move. Of course, Some ordinary demonic beasts with less mutation and almost no magic power could survive, but these mindless beasts could no longer threaten the safety of the relic. This time, Celine finally made it. Pasha pulled out the tentacles, panting, and looked at Aletheia. Go and see the situation on the surface. Then she moved to Elena's side. What's the situation? Elena was covered with blue and black blood. Half of her arm was gone, and her hair was soaked in sweat, as if she had just been fished out of a river. Fortunately, all of them are here. Pasha let out a sigh of relief. Looking around, she saw that the witches who could still move were still holding up their shields, while the exhausted witches were lying on the ground, trying to regain their strength as soon as possible. Even though they had just gone through a great battle, their expressions did not reveal the slightest trace of exhaustion or despair. Instead, they grinned and waved at her in a relaxed manner. Obviously, everyone thought the same as her. They treated every battle as the last one in their lives, and they would not regret it even if they had to sacrifice everything for the tequila. This made Pasha feel a little sore in her eyes, and a warm current slowly flowed in her heart like a hot spring. Every witch was equally important. Over the past 400 years, the number of witches had never increased. They had already accumulated a deep affection for each other, so it was good news that none of them were missing. But this body has to be changed. Elena sighed. It took me a long time to choose this body. I don't know if there is a more handsome and strong one in the new body. Pasha didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Don't talk about such a boring topic at this time. She stretched out her tentacle and knocked on their heads. Is there anyone else who needs to be replaced? About 5 or 6, Elena said, counting with her fingers. Betty's stomach was cut open on the way. Izzo was sprayed by the magma to cover Aletheia. Only his head can be seen. The rest of them are like me, missing arms and legs. They've been taken away to preserve their souls. So you're planning to pick a suitable body before moving? Of course. I don't even feel it anymore. At least I should change it to something more comfortable. Elena curled her lips and put the blood-stained giant's sword on her back. She staggered and fell to the ground after taking 2 steps. Hey, this damn body. Scourge didn't feel pain or fatigue, but the physical exhaustion was real. Even if he was still full of spirit, the exhausted body would become extremely weak, as if it was out of control. Let me take you there. Pasha rolled Elena up with her tentacle and walked to the side room of the hall. All the gods' punishment warriors who came from Hermes without a master were collected there for the survivors. I remembered that some of the new batch looked pretty good. You also care about this? Elena looked at her with interest. Pasha coughed involuntarily. Don't forget, I'm also a witch like you. When she finished dealing with the wounded, Aletheia and Celine brought good news and bad news. The former was that most of the demonic beasts in the maze had been killed and the flying beasts circling outside had fled. There should not be another large-scale attack in a short time. The latter was that 2 parts of the instrument of divine retribution had been damaged, probably because of the hasty formation of the new core. In short, they would not be protected by the instrument for the next week. The bad news made Pasha a little worried. Even this degree of activation could damage the core. If it were the chosen one, could it only be used once? The more complex the key was, the wider the range of the instrument of divine retribution would be. The instrument she activated could only cover the whole maze, which was a distance of several hundred meters. It was far from enough to fight against the demons. When the magic power was full, she and the instrument would have been destroyed by the spear throwing. Only the chosen one could spread the light wave more than 10 miles away, so that the instrument of divine retribution could become the most powerful weapon against the enemy. Due to the lack of high-quality demon-loving materials, they could only pick and choose in the ruins. They were all fragile bone products, so it was normal that they could not meet the requirements of the core. After all, it was almost a god's creation. If the Quest Society was still here, they could use gold, silver, and gems freely. At least they didn't need to be tested and repaired every time. Anyway, don't test again this winter. I don't want to live such a thrilling life every day. Aletheia complained. There is no chance to test again, huh? She suddenly paused. Wait a minute. What's wrong? Pasha asked. Look at the phantom instrument. Celine used the main tentacle attached to the roof to float to a smaller magic core. The luster of the core changed. The 5-colored stone was broken. Both of them were shocked, and a bad premonition arose in their hearts at the same time. Phyllis would only break the magic stone in her hand when she had to contact the maze. It had only been more than a month, so it was unlikely that she had found the chosen one. Either she was in trouble and had to ask the maze for help, or the ring had been destroyed by someone else. No matter what the situation was, it was not good news. Can you confirm her location? Alethea asked in a low voice. Celine inserted her tentacle into the core. Southwest of us, away. It should be in the kingdom of Grey Castle, near the entrance of the fertile plains. The western region of Grey Castle. It seemed that she had arrived at the destination of this trip. Pasha could not help but think. So what was the problem that forced Phyllis to break the magic stone? Did she accidentally expose her identity? Or did the witches of the New Age see her as an enemy? Or, no, it could not be so smooth. Pasha shook her head and threw the distracting thoughts out of her mind. She was most likely in trouble. What are you going to do? Alethea looked at her. She thought for a moment and replied. According to the plan, the phantom instrument would be activated 1 day later. This was the shortest preparation time for the instrument. Chapter 731. The Witch Union welcomes you to join us. Vendi spread the prepared contract on the table and said to the witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart with a smile, read the oath on the back of the contract and sign your name. Then you'll officially become a member of the Union. This process should have been completed long ago if Princess Tilly had not proposed the hunting competition. Regardless of who won or lost, she had been worried about the competition during the few days of preparation. The day of the hunting competition had been like a year, and she had even complained about His Majesty for a long time. Coupled with the artillery exercise that followed, the competition had been postponed. However, to her surprise, Annie, who seemed to be calm, had come to her. Sister Vendi, don't you want to test our abilities first? Amy asked. After staying in Neverwinter for a week and a half, this lively little girl had won the favor of most of the witches. Her naive and trusting personality made her quickly familiar with the others, and now she could call Vendi sister quite easily. The test is usually arranged after the signing of the contract, Vendi said softly. If you have any questions about the terms of the contract, you can ask them now. Amy was the only one who could understand the words. The other 3 witches gathered around her, listening to the terms and exchanging opinions. Vendi looked at the witches who were whispering to each other with great interest, and could not help but recall the scene when she had signed the contract. At first, she thought that the rules were too inconceivable, and that it was likely that the Lord was deliberately showing his benevolence. It would not be long before he changed the rules completely, or he would implement a set of secret rules to restrict the witches' actions. However, later she found that she was wrong. Until today, 2 years later, the basic framework of the contract had not changed. Based on this point alone, Vendi felt that the choice she had made at that time was the best decision in her life. Wow, we can get a golden dragon every month. Can we buy whatever we want? The part about paid leave can't be true, right? If His Majesty can't provide security and shelter, the witches have the right to terminate the contract. Is this really not a betrayal? Vendi answered their questions with a smile, just like how she answered herself in the past. She could almost guess at which moment Annie and the others would exclaim in surprise, because she had been just as surprised when she read the entire contract. His Majesty had given the witches what they longed for the most, freedom and recognition. The fate of the Witch Union was closely linked to that of Roland Wimbledon. Vendi believed that even if His Majesty fell into a crisis in the future and could no longer provide him with food and shelter, they would not leave his side. This connection was not written in the contract, but it was stronger than words and language. However, it was foreseeable that there would be fewer and fewer scenes full of fun and memories. The newly awakened witches had a completely different living environment from them. They no longer had to face the threat of the church, nor did they have to face the hostility of the people around them, or even their relatives. Naturally, they would not be like them, grateful for their hard-won new life. After confirming the terms, it was time to read the oath and sign. There were no mandatory rules in the agreement. It only stated that they had no hostility towards Roland and the Witch Union and that they had joined the union of their own free will. After the four witches finished reading, Vendi received a pinch from Nightingale to confirm its authenticity. Now we're sisters. She smiled and hugged the four witches. In this way, there were 4 more members of the Witch Union. The place to test their abilities was outside the witch building, in Leaf's garden jungle. The first one to be tested was Annie. Vendi had learned a lot about her ability from Amy. Annie could also produce high temperature, but she could not ignite an open flame like Anna. The temperature was only attached to the surface of her palm. In the early stage of awakening, it was almost as hot as a torch. In adulthood, when it solidified, it could make iron red hot and melt lead and bronze. Throughout the test, Annie looked a little gloomy. It was obvious that she did not have much confidence in her ability. Thinking of Annie's experience of being rejected by the Bloodfang Association, Vendi could understand what she was thinking. In the Witch Cooperation Association, she had seen many witches like Annie, such as Mystery Moon and Echo. No matter how useless they seemed, they could always be reborn in Neverwinter. Great ability, Vendi encouraged. The mechanical processing plant in the industrial zone will definitely welcome you. Really? Annie was a little surprised. Even if the temperature can't be separated from the palm? Of course, the furnace area and the chemical laboratory are also. You'll definitely become a busy person in the Union. She smiled and wrote down several possible positions in her notebook. No one was more proficient than His Majesty in identifying the use of the ability. With her current knowledge, she was far from qualified for this job. Therefore, Vendi often wrote down her ideas and gave them to His Majesty for review and judgment. In the process, she improved her ability. Her ability was not as good as most of her sisters, and she was not the best in learning. Now that His Majesty had asked her to manage the Witch Union, she did not want to let him down. After Annie retreated doubtfully, the second one to come forward was Amy. Vendi could not bear to test her ability in detail. Fast self-healing seemed attractive, but it was based on the destruction of her body. The only thing to be thankful for was that witches were always in a state of minor injuries, so Amy did not have to worry about the threat of magic power bite. After a brief inquiry, Vendi wrote down the position of the medical center in her notebook. After thinking about it, she found that this was the only place that was slightly related to healing. The third witch hero was also the same. She could transfer the disease, but not the trauma. There was no better place than the medical center. However, when she thought that the so-called disease was caused by tiny insects, she might be able to cooperate with Lily to carry out microscopic research. With this in mind, Vendi drew a circle beside the hero's name. After she received universal education and had a certain understanding of natural science theoretical foundation, there might be new changes in her ability. The last one was Broken Sword. Vendi had more or less heard about the abilities of the 3 witches, but this Silver Witch had never shown her ability in front of Yorko and Phyllis. Let's start. She nodded at Broken Sword. Broken Sword took a deep breath and closed her eyes. With a surge of magic power, her whole body burst into a dazzling light, which was almost impossible to look at directly. Vendi could not help but squint and take 2 steps back. In terms of this momentum, Broken Sword was much more powerful than the other witches in the kingdom of Wolfheart. When the light dissipated, she sucked in a breath of cold air, almost unable to believe her eyes. Chapter 732. This is your ability? It took a while for Vendi to react. She can't hear you, Annie said. After turning into a weapon, Broken Sword will lose the ability to communicate with the outside world. Only when you hold her will she be able to perceive the world through your 5 senses. So that's how it is? Wendy hesitated for a moment before she stepped forward and gently grasped the hilt of the sword. In an instant, her mind seemed to have gained an additional consciousness. The blade of the sword fused with her at this moment, as if it had become a part of her body. Not only that, Vendi also felt that her vision and hearing had become much sharper, and her whole body was full of strength. This is symbiosis. Broken Sword's voice rang in his mind. When you pick me up, everything I have will be attached to you. Speaking of this, her voice seemed to reveal a trace of regret. Unfortunately, my body is not very good since childhood, and my strength is limited. Even if I am with you, I can't help much. So the reason why I feel full of strength is because I inherited Broken Sword's ability. Vendi raised the weapon and carefully looked at it. The hilt felt warm and soft, like a living thing. The shape of the blade was a bit strange. It was only about an arm's length, but it was thin like a finger, flat at the front and round at the back. Rather than saying it was like a sword, it was more like a magnified needle. If one looked closely, they could also see the fine stripes on the blade, as if it was tied up by countless silver filaments. Vendi could not help but think of Broken Sword's striking silver hair. How long can you maintain this form? If you don't change repeatedly, it can last forever. It seems like it's the same as Maggie, she thought. Only the moment of change will consume a lot of magic power. Maggie? Do you mean that huge pigeon? Vendi was stunned for a moment before she realized that as long as she was close to Broken Sword, she could see her thoughts. This made her a little flustered. After all, there were some things that she did not want anyone to know. Your mood is a little unstable. What is this, a cloth belt? Nothing. Wendy hurriedly stuck the blade back into the ground and looked at Annie. Ahem, can anyone become one with the Broken Sword? In theory, as long as she is willing to accept it, ordinary people can also get her power. Annie nodded. But in that state, she is just an extraordinarily hard weapon. Only in the hands of witches can she exert her true strength. In the hands of witches? Annie seemed to have noticed something and said calmly, in addition, telepathy doesn't mean spying on your mind. As long as you don't focus on your current thoughts, Broken Sword won't be able to detect your mood. I see. Vendi calmed down and grasped the hilt again. Did I say something wrong just now? I'm sorry. I won't casually ask such a question again. Broken Sword's eager voice immediately appeared in her mind. No, nothing. She suddenly thought of a question. If I suddenly put you down, what would you see? They would become pitch black, without any sound or touch, as if they were floating in the void. Sure enough, the experience of losing all senses in an instant will not be good. Thinking of this, Vendi said as slowly as possible, I should be the one to apologize. Don't worry, I won't casually leave you behind again. Dagger looked a little surprised and replied softly after a while. By the way, Annie said that only witches can exert your true strength. That's right. If I fight in the form of a weapon, I will also get hurt if I bump too much. However, witches can increase the sharpness and attack range of the blade by injecting magic power. Even without touching the enemy, they can still stab him. Wendy followed his instructions and injected magic into the Broken Sword. The silver sword was suddenly covered with a layer of hazy white light, like a constantly flowing mist. At the same time, she felt the level of magic power in her body was rapidly declining. Obviously, this state could not be maintained for long. Under the urging of Broken Sword, Vendi aimed at an olive tree branch and quickly waved the long sword. She saw a sharp air flow from the tip of the sword and instantly cut the branch in half. This is wind? She asked in surprise. The magic power injected will reflect the power of the sword holder to a certain extent. It turns out that you are a combat witch. Broken Sword was a little surprised. If it's Annie, she can't let her power leave the blade. So that's how it is. Vendi could not help thinking of Anna's Blackfire. If she attacked with all her magic power, what would the scene be like? It would probably be no less powerful than the sigil of God's will that could trigger the Sky Thunder. However, Anna was one of the most important witches in the Alliance and His Majesty's beloved. It was basically impossible for her to go to the battlefield in person. As for the other combat witches, she thought for a long time but could not find a suitable candidate, so she simply circled Broken Sword's name. It was better to let His Majesty decide who should cooperate with Broken Sword's ability. When the loud and melodious whistle came from the direction of the dock, Roland put down the quill in his hand and could not help but stretch. One long and two short, the whole dock resonated. This was the signal for the army to set off. After completing the battle preparations, the expedition team of the First Army spent only one morning boarding the ships. The first batch of cement ships carrying soldiers would officially leave Neverwinter for Fallen Dragon Ridge with the sound of the steam whistle. After that, many ships would take on the task of transporting ammunition and provisions. Until the new and old soldiers finished gathering at Fallen Dragon Ridge, the battle to recover the southernmost region would officially begin. However, he had finally taken this step. Roland glanced at the densely packed sketches on the table. They were the design drawings of the internal combustion engine. As the second-generation prime power machine that completely replaced the steam engine, it was self-evident that the internal combustion engine was of great importance to the industry and even changed the course of world history to a certain extent. From the first piston engine and gas turbine to the later jet engine, the internal combustion engine almost carried half of the sky of industrial power. It was not until the appearance of the electric motor that the insufferably arrogant dominant position was shaken. There was no doubt that as one of the most important machinery in history, the internal combustion engine would blossom in a new era in Neverwinter. The Blackwater in the southernmost region was an extremely important part of this plan. If he could extract fuel from it, the following development would naturally be a matter of course. If not, he could only consider using alcohol as fuel. Even if it was technically feasible, the scale would definitely be greatly limited. At this moment, Agatha suddenly knocked on the door and walked into the room. Chapter 733. In the center of the Hall of the Ruins, the phantom instrument was fully opened and filled with magic power. Its core was emitting a cold purple light. Next, as long as Pasha gave an order, it could project the light curtain thousands of miles away, which was beyond the witch's ability. It was a power given by God. Pasha looked behind her. All the sarcomas had fallen to the ground. The god's punishment witches stood side by side with the most serious expressions. The dead demonic hybrids were deliberately piled up on both sides. The pale blue blood reflected the purple light, looking gloomy and horrible. If it were a group of common people, they would definitely be shocked by this hellish scene, right? Pasha did not want this to happen. After the demonic beasts' corpses decomposed, they would leave behind sticky remains, which were not only difficult to remove but also emitted a disgusting stench. The god's punishment witches could not smell it, but Pasha could feel it with her tentacles. After 400 years, this hall was no different from their home. Who would want to make a mess of their own hall? But she had to be prepared for the worst. That was, Phyllis was in danger and the ring was not broken by her. If that really happened, it was necessary to create the most terrifying atmosphere to frighten and deter those who did harm to her. The western region of Grey Castle was close to the entrance of the fertile plains and was undoubtedly attacked by demonic beasts every year. Whether it was witches or common people who attacked Phyllis, they should be able to tell from the mountain of demonic hybrids' corpses that they were definitely not to be trifled with. Only by making them aware of the power of the tequila survivors could they buy time for the rescue. "Activate the instrument," Celine said. "No matter what, we have to find out Phyllis's situation first." Pasha nodded her main tentacle and gave an order to the instrument. In an instant, everyone felt the light around them dim a little. A huge purple light curtain covered the whole hall. On the other side of the phantom instrument, the scene when the five-colored stone was broken appeared. Pasha could not help but be surprised. It was not a gloomy dungeon, nor was it a desolate wilderness, but a bright hall. The hall was bright and clean. A long wooden table covered with a white cloth was placed in the middle of the hall. There were fresh flowers and teacups on the table. There were no signs of a fight. It was as if this place was deliberately chosen to destroy the magic stone. Phyllis was standing by the window, chatting with another witch. When she saw the light screen appear, she turned around with a surprised look on her face. "What's wrong with you guys? Was the hall attacked by demonic beasts?" Pasha was speechless. She suddenly felt that Phyllis's situation was different from what she had imagined. Phyllis did not seem to be attacked or tortured, nor did she seem to be in danger. Instead, she looked even more energetic than before. After taking a closer look, he found that Phyllis was no longer wearing the vulgar and cheap-made clothes, but an exquisite woolen robe. Set off by the gorgeous clothes, it was natural that her complexion was better than before. The other witches were not much better. They looked at each other for a long time, but no one said anything. Fortunately, they could not see their expressions after turning into blobs, or the atmosphere would be very awkward. The demonic beasts did launch a large-scale attack recently, but don't worry, the magic core and the relics of the gods are safe and sound, and everyone is safe. As a person who was used to great storms, Pasha was the first to recover. There are too many corpses and we haven't had time to clean them up. Is that so? Phyllis showed a doubtful look. Of course, ahem. Pasha waved her tentacles at the gods' punishment witches behind her. Okay, everyone, continue to clean up the corpses and try to throw them out of the maze before the rotten liquid sticks to the floor. The witches who stood side by side with solemn expressions quickly became gloomy. There are so many corpses, how long will it take to move all of them? It took a whole day just to pile them up. I don't want to touch these sticky things at all. Yes, even if you don't feel it, it looks disgusting. Stop complaining. Do you want to lie in the corpses and sleep? Throw them all into the magma. At most, they will be smothered by the smoke. Smothered? Do you want the whole ruins to become a chimney? The blue-haired witch beside Phyllis could not help but chuckle. I guess they must be worried that something bad has happened to you, so they put on a posture to scare the negotiation partner. Somehow, Pasha felt that the voice was very familiar. She looked at the witch carefully, and suddenly a name flashed in her mind. You are Agatha? What? Celine asked in surprise. The youngest senior witch in history? That's impossible. Didn't she die with tequila? Even if she escaped from the holy city, it has been more than 400 years. How could she still be the same? Many people's minds were ringing. Not only the promoted living in the sarcoma, but also the gods' punishment witches also gathered around. She is indeed the senior genius, Phyllis confirmed. When Agatha was besieged by demons in the research tower in the misty forest, she completely froze herself with a multi-layered ice coffin and killed all the enemies who were chasing her. It was not until the Witch Union found the ruins of the stone tower that they rescued her. I see. Hearing this, Pasha could not help but feel excited. An exciting idea came from the bottom of her heart. Phyllis was not in trouble, and she quickly revealed her identity to the witches in Grey Castle. She also met a promoted tequila. The purpose of contacting the labyrinth was obvious. Could it be that this senior witch was the chosen one they were looking for? When she asked this question, Phyllis showed a look of embarrassment and hesitation. She first glanced at Agatha, and then said in a low voice, "Can you let me talk to them alone? It won't take too much time." Agatha nodded. "When you are done, I will inform His Majesty." Then she turned and left the hall. Then Phyllis took a deep breath and looked at Pasha again. I did find the chosen one indicated by the magic stone, but he is a little different from the candidate in our plan. Pasha was stunned. Before she had time to ask further, she heard an almost bizarre experience from Phyllis. The close cooperation between the witches and the mortals. The powerful army that defeated the church. The powerful gunpowder weapons with infinite power. Chapter 734. When Phyllis told them the news, the hall burst into an uproar. How can a mortal contact God? Alethea's voice was full of shock and disbelief. You must be wrong. Are you sure the beam of light came from him? Have you checked all the witches in the western region of Grey Castle? Celine pointed to the crux of the problem. Obviously, these two questions were also on the minds of most people. I've confirmed it with my own eyes, and his key is much more complicated than what Pasha asked for. The 5-colored stone can no longer contain the gable orange light, Phyllis said slowly. I also found it hard to believe at first, but it's true. Then does he have magic power? Pasha asked with a last glimmer of hope. Unfortunately, he can't activate the instrument of divine retribution. Phyllis's answer made everyone look gloomy. It was unexpected that the chosen one with a complicated key could be found so quickly, but it was too unexpected. No one could have expected that the magic power could be separated from the key, which completely subverted their previous ideas. Without magic power, it was impossible to connect to the core, even with the help of witches. The physique of a mortal could not bear the damage caused by this extraordinary power. Even if a very strong person could hold on for a quarter or two, they could not master the key points of using magic power, which had been fully proved in the Tequila era. What worried Pasha even more was that she had thought that senior witches had a high chance of becoming the chosen one. In the era when the Union ruled the fertile plains, she could easily find a dozen candidates who met the requirements. But the news brought back by Phyllis completely changed her idea. There were more than 10 senior ascendants in the small city of Neverwinter. Such an amazing number meant that the Witch Union was no weaker than some of the core organizations of the Union, such as the Quest Society and the Blessed Army, which only had so many senior ascendants. But even so, Phyllis did not find the other chosen one. Destroying the demons was originally within reach, but they missed the opportunity because the ruins were discovered too late, and they were never even close to the target, and the chosen one's plan was wishful thinking from the beginning to the end. These two feelings were completely different. If so many senior witches could not meet the requirements of the chosen one, was it really right for them to follow Lady Natalia and resolutely resist the Queen of Starfall City's God's Punishment Army plan? Just thinking about it made Pasha shudder. She shook her head and suppressed her thoughts. She then asked, "You just said that the mortal king wants to cooperate with us? He wants to know us, and he's willing to join hands to fight against the demons," said Phyllis, "but we'll have to talk about the details later. Do you think he has the ability to fight against demons?" "I'm not sure. The weapon he showed us is indeed powerful, but I know too little about it." Phyllis hesitated for a moment. But Agatha is confident about it. She thinks that as long as Neverwinter is given another 2 or 3 years, it's not impossible to keep the demons west of the impassable mountain range. "What does she think of our relationship with Neverwinter?" Alethea asked in a low voice. "Agatha thinks she's a tequila witch, but she'll work for Roland Wimbledon, that is, the mortal king." Phyllis paused and told the new union's thoughts. She thinks that the most urgent task at present is to defeat the demons, and all the forces on the continent should unite and fight for the third battle of divine will. Work for the mortals? Is she crazy? Alethea shouted. Did she forget how we lost to the demons in the first battle of divine will? The crowd also started to talk noisily. Almost all the members of the Union had to learn about that period of history. There might be outstanding extraordinary witches among the mortals, but as a whole, it was really embarrassing to talk about their performance. For example, they opened the city gate and surrendered to the demons, only to be killed. Another example was the witch army that traveled thousands of miles to help, only to be rejected by the Lord. They could only watch helplessly as the reinforcements were killed by the demons. There were also countless cases of cowardice and desertion. Sometimes, a huge army of 20,000 to 30,000 people was not even as powerful as an elite team of 100 witches. In some places, there were even cases of mortals using God's stones of retaliation to deal with witches, which exacerbated the rupture of cooperation between the two sides. If not for this, human beings would not have retreated all the way from the vast land of Dawn to the fertile plains. With such a poor performance, coupled with the shortage of food and resources, it was only natural that the witches completely replaced the regime of the mortals. Looking at Alethea, who was waving her tentacles to show her dissatisfaction, Pasha was also worried. According to Phyllis, King Roland Wimbledon of Greycastle might be an outstanding extraordinary, but it was difficult for a single person to change the whole group of mortals. If the other kingdoms made stupid and low-level mistakes, which side would he take? If the war continued for 20 or 30 years, Would he still be as determined and energetic as he was when he was young? Not everyone was willing to possess an empty body and lose all senses in order to prolong their lives. Even if he agreed, what about his descendants after 40 or 50 years? Would they be willing to be the heir for life? These were all questions that Pasha needed to consider. Generally speaking, as long as the demons could be defeated, any price was acceptable. Whether it was Alice or Natalia, they all believed in one thing. As long as the human race existed, the witches would never cease. One day, they would return to the top. This was the essential difference between God's favored and mortals. She was worried that they would pay the price but still fail. After all, they would not have another chance to try again. Let's talk to Roland first. Agatha used her main tentacles to press down the indignant Aletheia. When I was in the Quest Society, I had dealings with Agatha. Although she sympathizes with mortals, she won't act on impulse. Besides, we originally planned to communicate with the secular kingdoms. Now we have a king who doesn't discriminate against witches and is ready for the battle of divine will. Isn't it an ideal start for us? I agree. It's impossible for us to stop the demons with only a few of us. With the help of mortals' propaganda, we can also expand our influence in the witch organization. And he's also helping to recruit witches. In this way, Phyllis will have a greater chance to find the second chosen one. I'm curious about those gunpowder weapons. If we have them, will we be able to kill the demons as easily as we kill demonic beasts? The gods' punishment witches all talked at once. Celine is right. Pasha sighed. Whether they accepted the new union or not, they had to reconnect with the mortals. An enlightened king like Roland was already the most suitable person to negotiate with. As for the future, they could only decide after the negotiation. Maybe Roland also had the same idea. Chapter 735. When Roland walked into the parlor, he was immediately attracted by the light curtain that covered half of the wall. The edge of the light curtain emitted a flickering purple light, as if there was a passage connecting different planes on the wall. The scene on the other side was very gloomy, like a huge hole in the depths of the earth. The thin red river flowed like a spider's web, illuminating the rock walls and the dome. The outline of the ancient ruins was vaguely visible. Judging from the realistic visual effect, this should not be a fabricated scene, but a real-time live broadcast from thousands of miles away. A huge blob monster was facing him, its tentacles all spread out, and a strange voice sounded directly in his mind. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Your Majesty Roland Wimbledon, King of Grey Castle. I'm Pasha, one of the survivors of Tequila. You must have heard about us from Phyllis." "So this is what direct communication is all about," Roland said as he sat down on the other side of the light curtain. Nightingale, Agatha, Wendy, and Scroll were also present with him. "It's good that you guys talk for a while, so I don't have to introduce myself." "You don't look surprised at all." Pasha seemed a little surprised. "I thought it would take a long time for you to accept that we are witches." "Because I've seen too many things like possession and prosthetics," Roland thought to himself, but he still said calmly, "The bloody moon is coming, and time is running out for both of us. Instead of hiding and suspecting each other, it's better to be honest with each other from the beginning. Since you used to be the rulers of the continent, you should understand this." Pasha was stunned for a moment, and then she chuckled. "Phyllis is right. You are indeed a rare, extraordinary person. I'm just standing on the shoulders of my predecessors." Roland spread out his hands and said, "Let's get down to business. We all have the same goal, which is to fight against the demons. Apart from searching for the chosen one, you also sent Phyllis to communicate with the secular kingdoms. Am I right?" "Exactly," Pasha admitted generously. "At first, we just wanted to infiltrate secretly and slowly recruit or control some mortals to search for the chosen one. The black money of the Kingdom of Dawn was one of them. However, the failure of the church allowed us to see another kind of hope. That was to stand in front of the stage openly and gather all the witches in one place." "That's why you're interested in Grey Castle?" According to the information collected, Sleeping Island in the fjords has the largest witch organization at present, and its leader is the sister of the king of Grey Castle. Grey Castle is a big country that personally defeated the church, so it is a very suitable choice as the first stop to find the chosen one. However, I didn't expect that Phyllis would contact you so quickly and bring me a piece of shocking news. To be honest, we thought it would take at least 2 or 3 years to get to this point. Very good, it seems that we've saved another 2 or 3 years. This achievement alone is enough to make this conference go down in history. Roland smiled. It seems that you're right. Pasha also smiled. Provided that we can defeat the demons and continue to survive in the Land of Dawn. Of course, as long as ordinary people and witches put down their barriers and work hand in hand, the demons are not unbeatable. Roland paused. I can also help you find the chosen one. After all, it's always good to have another powerful weapon against the demons. However, cooperation must be based on mutual understanding. What do you think? I agree. Pasha's tentacles swayed in unison. If you want to know anything, please ask, Your Majesty. He looked around and exchanged glances with Agatha, Vendi, and Scroll. Then he slowly said, after learning the buried history from Phyllis, my biggest question is, what on earth did you find in the ruins that made Tequila break with Starfall City and even led to the collapse of the Union? This was also one of the key reasons why Roland decided to take the initiative to contact the survivors. For example, the technology of soul transfer was something that current technology could not solve. The instrument of divine retribution, which could replace the plan of the gods' punishment army and completely destroy the demons, must also be extraordinary. Roland would not blindly believe that the technology he knew was perfect. Every modern person knew the principle of learning from others' strong points to make up for their shortcomings. In fact, he had always wanted to incorporate magic power, which seemed to be omnipotent, into science and technology. When he saw that the ancient artifacts in the ruins could accurately project real-time images to the castle in the western region, he was sure that this conference was absolutely necessary. There was no doubt that this ability was beyond the limits of witches. Pasha, are you sure you want to tell him this? That's the secret of the gods. How much sacrifice did we make too? In an instant, several voices poured into his mind. Some were worried and some were dissatisfied. Only then did he realize that many people in Tequila were also watching this conference. It's because of the sacrifices we've made that we can't let them go to waste. Pasha interrupted the discussion. If we can't resist the demonic tide, do we have to take this secret to the grave, just like the tombstones we found? Her loud rhetorical question instantly silenced the room. Probably because she had hit the nail on the head, no one stood up to oppose her opinion. This made Roland a little concerned. It seemed that Phyllis's description of the survivors was not a lie. They did eliminate the influence of class and status to a certain extent. Otherwise, they would not have quarreled on such a big matter. But in general, Pasha still had a very high prestige among them. I'm sorry, this information is indeed very important. Pasha lowered her tentacles toward the living room as if to express her apology. But now, it can no longer be a secret, at least not between us. After a moment of silence, she continued, to be precise, we didn't find the ruins, but the ruins found us. Roland frowned. It found the tequila? Not the tequila, but us in an earlier era. Around the beginning of the first battle of divine will. Did the us Pasha mentioned refer to all human beings? For some reason, he faintly felt a chill rising from the soles of his feet. That happened more than 800 years ago. Chapter 736. Underground Civilization? Roland couldn't help but think of the forks in the North Slope mine, as well as the caves that Nightingale said ran through the impassable mountain range. In his memory, there was no geological movement that could create such a strange landscape. At first, he thought that it was caused by some mutated hybrid demonic beasts, but now it seemed that they were traces left behind by the underground civilization. At that time, People did not realize this at all, nor did they intend to communicate with each other. The forms of the two were so different that we even regarded each other as a new kind of demon. Therefore, there was a great discrepancy in the recorded history. It was not until the end of the second battle of divine will that a breakthrough was made. At that time, only Tequila was left out of the 3 holy cities, and the Union was at a critical moment of life and death. What do you mean by a breakthrough? The Quest Society figured out a way to store souls from the slate drawings they left behind, and verified this possibility on an unhatched primordial carrier. From then on, the 3 chiefs began to study the transformation of the God's Punishment Army. I don't know anything about this, Agatha said in surprise. Soul transfer was the Union's top secret. It was even 2 levels higher than the God's Punishment Army project, which used witches as experimental materials. At that time, only the 3 chiefs and a few high-level officials knew about it. Pasha replied, "We only learned of this shocking news after the fall of Tequila." So Natalia supported the plan of the God's Punishment Army from the very beginning. Roland frowned and asked, "And what's the original carrier?" Because she had no choice. As for the latter, it's what we are now. Her tentacles drooped down, and her body moved closer to the light screen. This ugly and weird body is the evidence of the underground civilization's existence, and the only tombstone they left behind. It's a long story, Your Majesty. Please listen to me slowly. Roland nodded and poured himself a cup of chaos drink. He leaned back on the chair and sensed the consciousness of the other party. According to the clues on the stone slab, the vanished civilization left behind a city in the impassable mountain range. The Quest Society searched for a long time but to no avail. Later, they suddenly realized that since the other party was used to moving underground, could they have built their city underground as well? After expanding the search area downwards, the witches finally found this magnificent city. It has a total of 4 layers, nearly half the size of Tequila. Each layer has countless forks and holes, making it as complex as a maze. If he didn't have a witch who could sense the location as a guide, once he fell into it, it would be difficult to get out. Therefore, the Quest Society also called it the Maze Ruins. Unfortunately, Tequila fell into the hands of the demons before they could explore it in detail. Everyone had no choice but to flee. After paying a heavy price, we finally arrived at the labyrinth. According to the plan, the Union would take away the original carriers stored in the labyrinth and then go to the Hermes Plateau to build a new holy city. They would then recast a new order in the barbarian land on the east coast of the continent. But no one can predict what will happen next. At this point, Pasha fell silent, and the scales on her body became dim. Even though he couldn't see her expression, Roland could feel the sadness in her heart. After a while, she continued, during the rest, the Quest Society found that the labyrinth ruins were well preserved, and it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a brand new city. In addition to the original carriers, the bottom layer of the ruins also hid many incredible secrets, among which the 3 most important discoveries were the magic core, the central carrier, and the records of the lost civilization. Later, we realized that as early as the first battle of divine will, it had wanted to lead us here. Pasha took a deep breath. The labyrinth ruins were prepared for us. Why? Tilly couldn't help asking. For revenge. Another voice sounded in everyone's mind. Compared to Pasha, this voice was much colder. It hoped that we could destroy the demons to avenge the extinction of their race. This is only Lady Natalia's speculation. There was no mention of this in the documents. Pasha waved her tentacles as if she was shaking her head. Perhaps they simply wanted to pass on their civilization. In short, the Quest Society found a lot of research information about divine will and magic power from the records left behind. In order to let us know the details, most of the conclusions were expressed in the form of lithographs. The description of the magic core was the source of the disagreement between the Queen of Sunchasur and the Queen of Starfall. The most important content in the lithographs was, magic power has infinite possibilities, and the process of pursuing divine will is the ladder of mastering magic power. Roland knew that this was the key point. What's the magic core? Is it related to the instrument of divine retribution? You can think of the magic core as an artificial magic cyclone. It's not limited by the witches themselves, and it can change its shape at any time. This incredible device completely subverts the Union's understanding. Pasha pointed at the light screen with one of her tentacles. For example, the phantom instrument we are using now is a small magic core. When necessary, it can also be transformed into other instruments. As for the instrument of divine retribution, it's the largest magic core in the ruins. I see. He immediately realized the advantages of this device. Compared with the witch's inborn ability, the magic core could be called a universal terminal. Most importantly, its effective range was far beyond the limit of 5 meters. Whether it was used for production or combat, it was much more powerful than the witches. But this is only the most basic use of magic power, just like the original awakening and the senior advancement. The Slate prophecy says that if we continue to deepen our understanding of magic power, one day we will be no different from God. Pasha said dejectedly, as if she was not talking about a magnificent thing, but a lost person who had lost his goal. Roland heard the key point of this sentence. But you don't have time. You're right. We don't know whether it will take 100 years or 1,000 years. In order to get in touch with the magic core, several members of the Quest Society were sacrificed. Obviously, the witches could not directly touch these strange instruments. We wanted to solve the problem, but we couldn't find a way, so the exploration was in a deadlock. The things that the drawings could record were extremely limited. If one wanted to continue studying them, he could only follow their instructions and fuse with the central carrier. When enough people fused with them, it was possible to understand their words and further read the more profound documents and records. But we don't have time. It took us more than 3 years to figure out these things. Many common people began to try to get rid of our control. We didn't know how many witches we needed to integrate with the carrier. At that time, we only had enough resources to focus on one research. If this continues, the Union's grand plan to restore order will lose its foundation. Chapter 737. Roland already knew what happened next. When the gods' punishment army was no longer the only way to fight against the demons, some people held the belief that they did not want to reduce their own kind to material for shells, and this caused a serious conflict with Alice. Now, it seemed that the battle of faith recorded in the history books of the church was probably another name for this battle of faith, using a fictitious victory to cover up the truth. The root cause of this conflict, apart from the difference in ideology, was that the higher-ups of the Union knew very well that no matter which plan they chose, they could not guarantee that they would be able to defeat the demons. According to Phyllis, the Queen of Starfall City's God's Punishment Army plan could indeed allow the Union to have about 3,000 to 4,000 powerful ordinary warriors before the Battle of Divine Will. However, the disadvantage was that once these thousands of people were lost, they could not be effectively replaced in a short period of time. It was a long process for the soul to adapt to the body. A group of warriors who could not bear the exhaustion might be able to resist the demon's attack for decades, or even recapture the ruins of the holy city of Tequila, but it would be unrealistic to break through the Land of Dawn. Needless to say, the Chosen One's plan was completely based on luck. It was normal to fail, but if it succeeded, not only would there be no side effects, but according to the record on the slate, it would also bring the witches closer to God. Comparing the two, one was betting on the present, while the other was betting on the future. In the end, you defeated the Starfall City? A rupture will not produce a real winner, and Tequila was not the final winner. After both sides lost their beyond mortals, Lady Eleanor stood up. To prevent this internal conflict, she threw herself into the central carrier and became the first witch to be integrated. You mean, the 3 chiefs are in the ruins of the labyrinth? Agatha said in surprise. Yes, the Union lost 3 beyond mortals, which means that the 3 chief system has completely collapsed, Pasha said sadly. In this way, the ruins became a part of the survivors that they couldn't let go of. Both sides had to take a step back and reach an agreement on the negotiation table. Tequila would stay to continue researching the magic core, while Starfall City would go to Hermes to build the new Holy City. As the original carriers are extremely limited, to ensure that we have enough manpower, they will provide a certain number of ownerless bodies to the ruins of the labyrinth for a period of 100 years. After the deadline is reached, if there is no breakthrough discovery, or if there are still no clues to the chosen one, they will take back all the research results from the ruins, including the soul storage device and the original carrier. At that time, Starfall City will come with the God's punishment army. If we violate the agreement, they will not show any mercy. Wait a minute. Roland sensed that something was not right. After that, the church never came looking for you? Judging from the result, the tequila witches were still hiding underground and did not gain the dominant position. The God's punishment army used by the church was still the incomplete version without consciousness. Obviously, they had an overwhelming advantage in numbers, but they did not send troops to occupy the ruins of the labyrinth. Did they forget this agreement? For a long time, we didn't have the ability to explore the outside world. The original carriers couldn't be exposed to the sun, and the witches who transferred their souls needed to adapt to their bodies again. Therefore, we didn't know what happened to Hermes at that time. Later, we realized that the new order they built no longer followed the will of Lady Alice. I knew it. Agatha gritted her teeth and said, I knew it was impossible for Lady Alice to do this. Compared with the God's punishment army, what the church did was completely destroying the foundation of the witches. The survivors on the other side all agreed with this statement. After everyone calmed down a little, Roland changed the topic and asked, what is the central carrier? What's the difference between it and the original carrier? They are all bodies. The original bodies of the vanished civilization are very fragile, so they have to live in the bodies. These bodies have the ability to live forever. As for where they come from, the documents did not explain in detail. This time, the person who replied seemed to be different. Compared to Pasha and the enraged one, her tone was very intellectual and gentle. In our current knowledge, the primordial carrier is the most common type of body. As for the central carrier, other than its similar appearance, it also stored many unconscious memories. It could be seen as a primordial carrier that had been used for years but had lost its consciousness. Only by fusing these memories together could the remaining documents and experiment records be deciphered. You are. Just by listening to this voice, Roland could imagine an academic woman wearing round black-rimmed glasses and waist-thick braids. My name is Celine, Your Majesty, one of the members of the Quest Society. I used to work with Agatha. I don't know her very well, Agatha leaned over and said in a low voice. Even if we work in the same research tower, we don't necessarily work on the same floor. But I heard that she is usually very quiet, but once she talks about things related to magic, she will change into a different person and become fanatical and unruly. Probably because of this kind of person, she became a loyal follower of Natalia. Roland coughed twice and asked, so the witches who were fused are still alive? Not really, Celine replied. In addition to Lady Eleanor and more than 10 witches who were seriously injured in the conflict, we had to integrate another 36 volunteers before we could awaken the central carrier. Not everyone is willing to become a monster or spend the rest of their lives in a cage where they can't feel anything. Unfortunately, it can't talk to us normally. It can only answer yes or no. Yes or no? Roland's heart slightly moved. Can I ask any question? It must be something it can understand. The clearer the condition, the faster it can answer. Without the central carrier, it is impossible to repair or change the magic core. Celine's voice gradually became excited. It's a combination of tequila's will. The more people it fuses with, the faster it will react. Therefore, for us, accompanying Lady Eleanor is the last contribution we can make to the pursuit of magic power. Roland's thoughts were completely different. Wasn't it the most primitive biological computer system to input questions and get feedback? If the conditions were set, could it solve equations? Could it complete complex calculations independently? If only I could abduct it to Neverwinter and study it. It was just that the current atmosphere was not suitable for such a request. He could only temporarily suppress the thoughts in his heart and plan to slowly come up with a plan when the conditions were discussed later. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.